Welcome to the JTP Sports Podcast. We want to give a big shout out to the guys from The Black Light for the theme music intro to the show. It's available on all streaming services, and you can check them out at The Black Music on Instagram. You can also find more information from them in the pod description.
Welcome back to another show. We're going to cover all of the Week 1 action in the NFL, give you a quick breakdown on how we saw the games play out, and our assessment of the teams. Let's start with Thursday night, Joey. Who played Thursday night? What was the final score?
Ugh.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are Bears fans like Paul and I are, it wasn't a fun one to watch. It was the opening night for the NFL, and if any of you were looking forward to any fireworks or anything interesting, you did not get what you were looking forward to.
It was a dud.
It was a rough game to watch. If you know what, if you like defense, you got what you wanted out of that, because both teams played defense really, really well. The final score was 10-3 Green Bay over the Bears. I don't know about you, man. It was a very odd football game in a lot of aspects. LaFleur didn't exactly show you anything. I felt that maybe he was playing it a little conservative, given the fact that he knew what he was up against in that Bears defense. Chuck Pagano did not embarrass himself whatsoever in that first game. It didn't look like the Bears defense missed a beat without Vic Fangio. Pagano, he had that team ready to go. With the exception of that one drive where Rodgers hit that deep pass to Valdez-Scantling, the defense really, really looked good. So, I mean, LaFleur didn't do anything that made you say, oh, wow. There were no offensive plays. There was nothing truly creative that really stood out to me as far as what the Green Bay offense did. I mean, Aaron Rodgers threw for 203 yards. That's sometimes that's a first half for him. So whenever you say that Aaron Rodgers finished the game with 203 yards and one touchdown, you're assuming the Packers probably lost by double digits, and that just wasn't the case. Matt Nagy put on his "I'm too cool for school" shoes and absolutely had an atrocious game plan. Nothing made sense. I mean, I don't think he ran the ball after midway through the third quarter, if you remember that correctly. So I don't think he put his team in a position to win, at least not his offense, because again, the defense showed up. They had Aaron Jones, who was a very capable runner, ran for all of 39 yards. So again, you've got their leading rusher at 39 yards. You've got a Hall of Fame top 3 quarterback and Aaron Rodgers throwing for 203, and you lose at home by only scoring 3 points. It was an embarrassing night for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, the defense was not the problem. I have no idea what the hell Matt Nagy was doing, like what his game plan was, what he was envisioning it to be, how he wanted it to play out. None of it made any sense. At one point, the Bears threw the ball 33 straight times. They ran the ball only 21% of the time total, and like you said, like basically the final third of the game, they didn't run the ball at all anymore. You know, the defense shut down Aaron Rodgers and that running attack as much as you really can. You know, outside of 3 plays on that drive where Rodgers got the TD pass to Jimmy Graham, outside of that, Green Bay did nothing that whole game for the most part on offense. They averaged they had a rushing average of 2.1 yards per carry on 22 carries for 47 total yards. It's nothing. So there was no running attack. Like you said, Aaron Rodgers only had 200 passing yards, you know, and 166 total if you include the sacks. So on 30 dropbacks,
Right.
He had 166 passing yards for an average of 6.8 versus Aaron Rodgers. You can't do much better than that. You know, that offense was absolutely pathetic. Mitchell Trubisky looked like he was lost and played in his first NFL game. But I think a lot of it, and I'm not taking anything away from how bad he was horrible. But that game plan from Nagy was atrocious. It's just horrific. I don't know what he was thinking. And here's another thing that I noticed that was happening. The Bears need to figure out which players they actually want to use. Mike Davis being in that game as often as he was and getting as much run as he was makes zero sense to me. You have David Montgomery and Tyreek Cohen. They're in front of him on the depth chart. We all know this, right? This is not up for discussion. You drafted David Montgomery to be the feature back in this offense, and you have Tyreek Cohen, who's coming off of a Pro Bowl year last year. Tyreek didn't get a carry. David Montgomery got a total of 6 carries. Well, they only ran the damn ball 12 times, so I guess he got half of them, but still. Like, they need to use him more. Mike Davis should only be on the field when David Montgomery needs to go take a breather. There is, or short yard situations or something like that. He should not be one of the featured guys that's out there literally every other or every third drive. It makes no sense. The passing attack was just pathetic. What I wanted to ask you is, based on the Bears offense we've been watching for the last year under Matt Nagy, is this offense dictated on Burton being available? Is this all dependent on the tight end? Because he seemed.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It seems that way. It seems like he doesn't know what to do if Trey Burton is unavailable. You saw that in the Philadelphia game, which at least, if you want to make an excuse for Nagy, and in our previous pods, for any of you who've listened before, I'm not willing to make that excuse for him, because you had whether or not you think a day is enough, you're a professional football coach in a playoff game. You need a day is more than enough time to make adjustments. So the playoff game, if you want to give him a pass on that, do with that as you will. But you knew Burton. What was it, Tuesday or Monday? You knew that he was on the injured report suddenly, so you could have manipulated your game plan to figure out what you were doing from there. But I mean, I don't know how much different it would have looked, because, as you alluded to, I told you and Ted's not here to defend himself, so I'll happily pick on him while he's not here. I said that they were going to give Mike Davis the ball more than you thought they were going to. I just didn't realize it was going to be quite that much. I mean, he had 5 rushing attempts, and he saw 7 targets in the passing game.
Yeah, so, it's crazy.
And I don't mind that if it's in the course of a game flow where there's a lot of things going on. If it just so happens to be where Davis is having one of those games where you're riding him because he's making guys miss, and he's showing you, he's giving you something to make you think that, all right, we're going to ride the proverbial hot hand, then I don't mind that situation, because, as I've said before, I don't dislike Mike Davis's skill set. I think he's a decent back. But you saw a couple plays out of Montgomery where he had that ability to break tackles, ability to make guys miss. His first real NFL carry, he hit that jump stop and then hit the hole for about a 6-7 yard gain, which was one of those ooh kind of moments. He had one catch. It went for 27 yards, and you're thinking maybe give that guy the ball more. So to me, what happened was Matt Nagy, again, got too cute for his own good. And I think you, Ted, and I had discussed this in the past. This might be a case where he has too many toys, and he's trying to use them all. And you throw too many ingredients in the pot, it's going to muddy what you're eating. And I think that's what happened here. He was trying to do too much, trying to get his passing game going, where he never gave the running game a chance to get going.
Yeah, well, we got to move off the Bears game, Packers game.
Happily.
But I want to touch on this, and we'll discuss this game later. Too many toys is not a problem. Look at what Sean Payton does in New Orleans. Now, of course, that's not a fair comparison to compare Nagy to Payton. But he's got all the toys he needs in New Orleans, and he knows how to use them. Somebody needs to sit Nagy down and tell them, look, these are your high-paid starters. You need to use them all the time, or like 80 to 90% of the time, and then sprinkle in the other guys. You should not have all these people coming in and out after every play, and then running Cordell Patterson on a 3rd and 2. Geez, I wonder who the ball is going to on that play. Like, it's just so stupid. You have 3 other running backs. You have Montgomery, who's a big back. You have Mike Davis, who's here for this kind of situation. And you decide on a 3rd and 2, a key 3rd and 2 in that game, because it's a 1 touchdown, 1 score game. You decide to run some nonsense with Cordell Patterson. These kinds of plays and all the trickery in the first like 10 scripted plays of that game where I didn't even know what formation they were in. It seemed like the whole team was confused. Like you alluded to this, they had no rhythm. It was just absolutely pathetic across the board. Nagy really needs to bounce back, and we'll go over the Bears' next opponent versus Denver. But I wanted to add a little bit to the Green Bay side, not to play favorites here. Their defense did look pretty solid, a lot better than I thought they would. Now, I don't know how good they actually will be because the Bears' offense was so bad. So bad. But they
Right.
did have a good game plan. They said they were out there to make, Mitch play quarterback, and it seemed like he had a very tough time doing that. The offense on both sides, there isn't much to talk about. Aaron Rodgers did what he's supposed to do. He got the one score, they won the game. But if Green Bay comes to your house and you hold them to 10 points, you expect to win that game. This is fully on the offense, and in my estimation, this is like 80% on Nagy and 20% on Mitch, and that's it. You can't really blame anybody else. You can move those numbers around however you want. Maybe you want to blame Mitch some more, whatever. Sure, I'll give you that. But this is just those two guys primarily. It seemed like Mitch had no idea what the hell they were going to run, how to use it, how to run the offense that was provided to him, and it seemed like Nagy had no idea what to call, and everything he called was wrong consistently. At 33 straight passes, what the hell? It doesn't even make sense. I don't know. It was a dumpster fire.
Yeah. I'll go so far as to say that Mike Pettin, not Matt LaFleur, Mike Pettin outcoached Matt Nagy in that game. He knew when to overload the line. He knew which coverages to give Mitch to confuse him, because I won't go as far as you did saying it looked like it was his first game, but he gave him a lot of looks, and they even said it after the game that if you take Mitch's first read away, he's just not that good, and that's exactly what he looked like that on Thursday night. You had that play by the rookie Savage, who his first pass defense could have very easily been a pick six. He just missed that interception. It just, again, Mike Pettin had his defense ready to go. You could say we can put this all again, and we're full disclosure again, we're Bears fans, but I'll come right out and say it. Mike Pettin went in there and he kicked Matt Nagy's ass, plain and simple. He had his defense ready to play that game. He knew, he did his homework. He knew that certain formations were going to lead to certain things. He had his guys in the right places. I don't even think that they generated too much of a pass rush. They were just doing enough to give the different looks and the different formations when they came to the line to make things a little more difficult, because they gave the offensive line a whole lot of trouble on Thursday night. And again, Mike Pettin coached his ass off for that game.
I'm not going to take anything away from that guy. He had a very good game plan. But you know what you do as a OC when your quarterback is struggling with the reads? You run the damn ball down the other team's throat and you make them line up in a standard formation because they have to stop the run. So what was Nagy's approach to that? Let's pass it 33 straight times. He didn't help Mitch at all. Like, at all. I don't know who outcoached who, and I agree with you that Nagy got outcoached for sure, but I think he outcoached himself. He really outthought himself. He didn't adjust. It was very bad. I mean, it looked really bad. It looks like the coach and the quarterback both regressed since the end of last season. We were both not too high on their performance in the playoff game and that game plan. This looked even worse than that. Like, they really have to get their stuff together and come out actually firing on all cylinders in Denver. And that's going to be very difficult. Not a lot of teams went there. But let's move on to the next game. The first game I had on our spreadsheet was Atlanta at Minnesota. This game was 28-12 Minnesota in their favor. It was a really weird game. I mean, Cousins only threw the ball 10 times. He was 8 for 10. He didn't need to throw the ball, though, because Minnesota carried the ball 38 times, including Cousins 6, so really 32, whatever. But they had 168 yards on those 32 carries for 2 touchdowns. Cousins got one of the other ones. They absolutely dominated that defensive front of Atlanta. Now, stat-wise, this game looks like it was completely one-sided. And maybe when it comes to the rushing attack, it was a little bit. It was a lot of it. It's not, make any notions about that. Minnesota dominated that defensive front of Atlanta. However, Atlanta really shot themselves in the foot here. That game got away from them really quickly. First, they had the blocked punt on the first possession, which gave the Vikings the ball at the 21. They scored a quick TD on that. The next drive, they had a pick that gave them the ball at the Atlanta 41. They were up 14 to nothing, halfway through the first quarter on the Falcons, and the game was almost over at that point. They made it 21-0 before halftime, and they were up 28 to nothing before the fourth. Atlanta started to make a bit of a comeback, but this game was a lot. This was one of the games where it was a lot closer than the scoreboard, in my opinion. Atlanta shot themselves in the foot. That offensive line didn't look very good. Their defensive front looked terrible. Couldn't stop the run at all. Cook looked great. 21 carries for 111 yards and 2 TDs. Matt Ryan did okay other than the 2 picks. The 2 picks he had were atrocious. The first one was he must have just not seen the guy coming. Somebody was dropping into coverage right underneath Julio Jones. Julio had another guy behind him, trailing him. He threw the ball and across to him. He didn't see Anthony Harris dropping back into coverage, threw it right to him. He picked it off. They scored right off of that. The other one was in the end zone when they were going in to score, and a really bad play call. I thought they took everybody off the field, went into like a 2 or 3 tight end set. I had one of those, tight end, pretend you're blocking, go to the back end zone, start running towards the corner. So he threw it as he was getting pressured, but the tight end stopped running. Harris just got an easy pick right there. So this game was closer, I thought, than it seemed. But either way, Minnesota did what they had to. They looked very solid. It couldn't have gone better for them. Cousins had to throw the ball 10 times total. He got a TD and 100 yards. What else do you need him to do if you're going to win the game by more than 2 touchdowns? I thought they were fine. Matt Ryan did all right. He had 300 passing yards, 2 TDs. Those 2 picks were a killer. The offense for Atlanta looked pretty good. I think they outgained Minnesota overall in total yardage. I'm actually pretty sure they did by quite a bit of a margin. They could move the ball when they needed to. The problem is they couldn't score, and just turnovers killed them. So that's kind of the tale of the game here. You got anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, again, like you were alluding to, if you looked at the stats, you would have assumed that, without knowing anything else, all things being equal, if you just looked at the stats, you would have assumed that Atlanta won this game comfortably. Granted, they didn't blow up the stat sheet. They had 345 yards to Minnesota's 269, but you say to yourself, 269 yards, there's zero chance Minnesota wins this game, yet they were up pretty comfortably, as you alluded to, until the fourth quarter. I mean, everything about this is weird. Atlanta had 27 first downs to Minnesota's 18. Third down conversions is what shot them in the foot. They were only 2 of 8. So if you don't convert on third down, you're 2 of 8 on third down, and you had three turnovers and a block punt in the first half, that's going to cripple you. I don't care who you are. And again, if you can't stop the run, that's just tick, 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 tick on the clock. So if that's their game plan, is just bludgeon you to death with that sledgehammer of a running back that they have. And even the rookie Madison had 49 yards on 9 carries. So Minnesota's running game looks legitimate right now. The question is going to be what happens to them going forward when there's a team that's able to actually nullify the run to some degree. What Kirk Cousins is able to do. 8 of 10 for 98 yards is extremely efficient. It's almost a throwback game to the olden days when guys didn't really pass all that much. But you're not going to see Thielen go 3 for 43 and Diggs go 2 for 37 all that often. So this is clearly just a case of the Vikings having a lot of things handed to them in the first half. Atlanta just did not do themselves any favors in the first half. Minnesota just beating them over the head with the running game. And by the time Atlanta got anything going, the clock just wasn't their friend at that point.
No, I mean, Minnesota, they didn't make any mistakes here. They got a couple of short fields scored on them, and why would you have Cousins throw the ball when every time you go back to run the ball, you get 5 yards on it? Both those guys on 30 carries, Cook and Madison, both averaged over 5 per carry for a total of like 160 yards, or exactly 160 yards on 30 carries. It's ridiculous. That defense for Atlanta looks problematic. I think their offense will be fine if they can get rid of those turnovers. I mean, Matt Ryan only threw 7 picks all of last year. He threw 2 in this one. I think they're going to be okay, but this one really got away from them early. Let's move on to the next game.
Well, before you go too far, here's another case of a team that got too cute for their own good, kind of, sort of. Because, yeah, a 21-point deficit at the half is bad, but you've got Matt Ryan, you've got Julio Jones, you've got Calvin Ridley, you've got weapons, you've got, Devontae Freeman, say what you will about him. You've got guys that can help you make up 21 points in a pretty quick manner. And to only have 15 run plays called, with Freeman having 8, Smith having 6, and some guy that I've never heard of running off one. Their second leading runner was Matt Ryan on 2 scrambles. So this is pretty much, it's fairly similar to what the Bears did. You have to run the ball. If you're gonna commit these turnovers in the first half, you got to do something to at the very least slow things down. 15 rushes. I mean, unless it's a situation that we're going to talk about later with Baltimore and New England, where they just can't stop you through the air. You have to run the ball when you've got this kind of thing going against. So 15 rushes, I don't care who you are. That's probably going to lead to you not winning a football game.
Yeah, I'll give them a little bit of a credit here, or a little bit. I won't be as harsh on them as you are when it comes to this, because they were basically out of the game at the start of the second quarter. So it was, already in comeback mode with 3/4 of the game still left to play. So,
but with all that talent, you think 21 points is out of it?
No, I'm not saying that. I still agree with you that they should have made more of an effort to run the ball. However, they are playing versus Minnesota. Their defense is very solid, and they can play well against the run. It's just that you're down 21-0 before you got off the bus, and you try to come back and spread it open a little bit, and they put everything on Matty Ice, and for the most part he did okay. That first pick already had happened. That second pick in the end zone was really a killer, because if they scored there, you're talking about a single score game in the fourth quarter, and who knows what's going to happen then. So they still ran the ball more than the Bears did, and they were down 21 points. So, there was some attempt on it, at least from this team, and I understand the circumstances where they were really out of it. They still had a better, I think, ratio compared to the Bears. Actually, let me make sure. They ran it 27% of the time, the Bears 21.5%, and the Bears were in a single score game till the end of the game. So, it's not the same scenario, but I fully understand what you're saying. But let's move on. Third game is the Redskins going into Philadelphia playing the Eagles. This game ended up 32-27 the Eagles' way. However, they were down, 17 early on? It was like 20-7 maybe at halftime. And then the Eagles kind of took the game over and stormed back. I know me and you were upset at this one because we both had Philly covering here, and Case Keenum marched his team down the field and scored a garbage TD with like 6 seconds left to blow that up for everybody that had the Eagles. So a couple notes. Keenum looked pretty solid. This team definitely gave more of a game to Philly than probably anyone thought. My biggest takeaways were from this were that Washington was fairly competitive, more than I thought they were going to be. And Philly still has problems in the secondary, and pretty blatant, obvious problems. Keenum threw for 380 yards with 3 TDs, no picks. He was 30 for 44, had a rating of 117.6. Washington only ran the ball 13 times. For some reason, they don't want to run it either, even though they got guys. Now, they couldn't do anything on the ground when they did run it. They had an average of 2.2 yards. On the other side of the field, Philly actually had, almost a 50-50 split here. They ran it 31 times for 123, and Wentz was 28 out of 39 for 313 yards and 3 TDs. He looked great. The other thing I wanted to bring up was D-Jack being back in Philly. It looked like he should have never left. I mean, it literally looked like a replay of like 6-7 years ago when he was just catching bombs from whoever was throwing the ball to him back then. It looked like deja vu. It looked like nothing had changed. On a couple of plays, he got a couple of balls from Wentz that went for like 50 yards each, and he ended up having 8 catches for 154 yards and 2 TDs on the day. That's pretty nice. What did you think of this game?
Yeah, first of all, I was stunned. stunned that it was 17-0 to start the game. And it's especially considering the fact that I hammered Atlanta. No, obviously we came down on the Bears as much as we did. Washington barely tried to establish the run. I mean, they had AP as an inactive before the game started. So Jay Gruden clearly thought he had one way of pulling this game off, and that was to go out and just have Case Keenum play gunslinger. Now, one of those touchdowns was a broken tackle by the ageless wonder, Vernon Davis. I mean, at what point is that guy going to slow down? I mean, he's just it's insanity what he's able to do. Now he doesn't take the beating because he splits the time out there with Jordan Reed, who is another guy that just can't stay healthy. But so that one was broken. How could Philadelphia possibly game plan for that McLaurin guy? Who knew who he was? I mean, I went into last week when we did our prognosticating saying that the Washington Redskins wide receivers was a big bowl of nothing, and they came out and they were ready to go. They were running up and up and down the field that first half. Carson Wentz finally got it together. Josh Norman is just not the cornerback he was a few years ago. And you would think that at some point Deshaun Jackson is going to slow down, but apparently not. He's still got that afterburner. Once he gets somebody turned, it's over. So that is going to be an interesting thing to look forward to for the rest of the year. Because say what you want about Carson Wentz and his ability to stay on the field, and whether or not he's able to make that connection with Alshon Jeffrey, who they just haven't been able to develop a chemistry. But if Carson Wentz is going to be able to air it out to Deshaun Jackson like that, Philadelphia Eagles games are going to be fun to watch because that's going to be a tough cover. I mean, Ertz didn't do much in the game. I mean, he had 5 catches for 54 yards. He wasn't that much of a factor. But they, like you said, they spread the wealth on the ground. Darren Sproles is what, 57 at this point? And he had 9 carries in that game. Jordan Howard was a productive offensive member of that game. Sanders didn't do everything you would have wanted him to do as far as productivity, but they gave him the ball. So the Eagles were we were just alluding to having too many toys to play with. The Eagles knew what they were doing, and 17-0 to them against the Redskins clearly wasn't panic mode. They stuck to their game plan. Washington inevitably slowed down. They didn't score most of their points until late third, late fourth. So I still think that the Eagles are far and away a better team. I just think that Jay Gruden had a vision of how this was going to play out and how he could jump on the Eagles, and they executed it well until the Eagles decided that enough was enough.
Keenum, I guess, turns out is a pretty serviceable quarterback if you need him to be with the right game plan, the right coach and OC. And just alluding to your point, it looked like they knew what they wanted to do, which spells trouble on the other side for Philly. You said, the receiving core for the Redskins is not top echelon in the league by any stretch of the imagination. And that broken play where Davis went in for like a 48-yard touchdown and broke like 4 guys was just atrocious tackling from that secondary. That Philly defense up front is very good, but that secondary is problematic. Like I don't like any of the guys they have back there, to be honest. I'm not crazy about any of them. I just don't think they're that good. Malcolm Jenkins is back there, but Russell Douglas, like, whatever. He does nothing for me. The other corners they brought in Sendejo, right? Like, he's a hitter. He's not a cover guy. They're not. None of those guys are extremely fast, and it showed. It showed up. They got burned over and over. That's how Washington went up. Philadelphia's offense was very reminiscent to the Bears game offense early in that game, like you said. They were kind of out of whack. They were out of rhythm. They didn't know what to do. The difference in this game versus the Bears game is that they went into the locker room, they reassessed things, changed things up, made adjustments, came out, became direct, started running the ball, went back to who they are, and got everything together. Even though they have all those toys and everything, they still went to the primary targets. They started running the ball. They still used a lot of Sproles, who was awesome. by the way, and he is like 57 years old. It's unbelievable. You know, it, they're a very scary team when they play properly, and they showed that in the second half when they took that game over. But that takes us to our next game.
Well, before you go too far on that, the Eagles are in big, big, big trouble the rest of this season because they lost Malik Jackson for the rest of the year to a Liz Frank injury. He is a big, big part of what they do up front. So I don't think they have anybody. You can't replace that guy. Not that they can have anybody that can step in. You just can't replace that guy. So the Eagles defense took a massive hit losing him for the rest of the season. So it's a small blow. It's usually a runner's injury. So it's odd that he would have gotten that, but it's a very small bone in the foot, and it takes a really, really long time to recover. And he's already been ruled out for the rest of the season. So it's a massive, massive blow to the Eagles defense.
Yeah, that's not good for them for sure.
No, he's their do everything guy up front. He plugs the hole when he needs to. He gets to the quarterback when he has to. He stops the run. Malik Jackson is as they say a grown ass man. So that's a big
Yeah.
time problem for the Eagles going forward for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and if they can't generate the same amount of pressure hold up versus the run the same way, and that secondary, I'm honestly after this game not as high on the Eagles. Now it is just week one, and they did correct a lot of things before the second half. They did take over, but this is versus the Redskins. They did give up damn near 400 passing yards. It looked very reminiscent to that New Orleans and I think Dallas game next year where they just got torched in the back end. And I know they had a lot of guys out, but it didn't look any better. It just didn't. I just don't think that secondary is very good, and there isn't going to be much they're able to do about it. At this point of the year, they just need that pass rush to get there, and if it doesn't, they're going to get burned. That takes us to the next game on our schedule, which is Buffalo at the Jets. What did you see here?
Ugh. What I saw was
it was pretty.
What I saw was two different halves of football. It was one team playing fairly well and the other team not so much. There's really not, you can't really gloss over this. It wasn't great. I mean, the Jets played well enough in the first half. Le'Veon Bell looked like the guy you would have wanted him to be. He wasn't the problem. The Jets couldn't muster any offense. It was a 6-0 game at the half. They're up 16-3 going into the fourth quarter. You think all they got to do is not crap the bed, and that's exactly what they did. The Bills came out in the fourth quarter, and I mean, I can't really put into words what that game was. It was not good football. It was not good football.
No, let me give you some of my notes on this. So Vedvik got cut today. We talked about that off mic a little earlier, and it looks like the Jets are blaming his for this loss. Now, if he made his kicks, this game's at least going to overtime, and probably the Jets win here, right? It would have been 20-17.
Right.
He wasn't. That's not why they lost this game. Let's just be honest here. So Darnold was just not good enough. Bell looked great. He looked like he didn't miss much time. He looked kind of like the old Le'Veon Bell. Robbie Anderson should have had 2 catches where he just didn't fight for the ball, which would have been at least pass interference calls. One was in the end zone where a guy just where I don't know who the DB was on the plane, but he just kind of tried to run under the ball and not really go up and get it, and the guy just kind of put his arm out there and it hit him, and it fell to the ground. The other one was in the fourth quarter where they're driving, and Darnold kind of hung it up in the air a little bit, but Anderson could have come back and got it. He just stood there waiting for the ball, letting the DB come back and get in the way of that one as well. It just wasn't a good enough effort. The Jets had a 16-0 lead in this game and had a 4-0 turnover margin. They needed to score more points. This was fully on the offense. The offense couldn't move the ball. They were just very lethargic out there. I mean, that's why they lost this game. It has nothing to do with the kicker. Now, Buffalo does have a very solid defense, and they kept them in the game, but that's the only reason why Buffalo won this game. Late in the game, Allen started moving the ball a little bit. They got some things running. The one thing I was still asking myself when I was watching this game is, why the hell did they cut Shady McCoy but keep Frank Gore? I don't understand that at all. But anyway.
Money.
Yeah, I guess.
Shady was due to make more money, and
Yeah, but
apparently they liked what they saw out of Devin Singletary. I mean, the kid had 4 attempts for 70 yards. That's clearly not a clip that's going to continue the rest of the season. But
right.
they like it. They liked what they saw out of him enough, and Frank Gore obviously is a lot cheaper, so that's probably why you make that move. But I mean, yeah,
Yeah, sure. Okay. If you need to keep that money, I guess. I don't know if they spent it on anything else, but that could have helped them. I mean, Singletary only got 4 carries. It was for 70 yards. He did bust a couple of long ones, but yeah. Other than that, the Bills looked okay. They kind of just stuck with it and ended up getting the win in the end. There was kind of a blown coverage there at the end on that final touchdown to John Brown, where who had a good game by the way, 7 for 123 and a TD. That last one was 38. I think it was like a third and something ball that Allen threw to him that went for a TD, and there was a corner right there, but he seemed to like just kind of run past him and go out of bounds. So it was just kind of a mess of a game. One big key is Mosley went out to an injury, a groin, I believe, for the Jets early in the fourth quarter, and when he did, Buffalo started moving the ball. That dude was everywhere on the field. He was awesome in this game. I hope he's back for the Jets' sake, because if he's not, they're in trouble. But I think he had a pick six, a recovered fumble. I might be mistaken on that one. Let me make sure. Yeah, he did recover a fumble. He was just all over the field. He looked like a monster out there. And when he went out of the game, it kind of changed things, and you could tell that the Jets at that point were missing 2 starting linebackers because the other dude that got injured in the preseason is already out. They just couldn't keep up for the rest of the game, and they started allowing a lot of yards to Buffalo, and then Buffalo kind of got the ball moving and took the game there in the end. I just think that the Jets need to kind of figure out their offense. Darnold looked like a young quarterback. He was 28 for 41 for only 178 yards, 28 for 175, a total of 4.3 average with 1 TD, no picks, but just not good enough. Nothing downfield. Everything is, dink and dunk. You're not going to win much doing that in the NFL, and it proved in this game. Any final thoughts?
yeah. I think Darnold, and I had him as my quote unquote dark horse quarterback for this year, and I think we were all a little high on the Jets going into this season. I think Robbie Anderson's calf injury limiting him was probably a big issue. He was also being shadowed by their number one corner, who again, like we said, Buffalo's defense. Both of these teams are going to be competitive in some games because their defenses are pretty solid. Adam Gase Adam Gase is a guy who again we were hammering Nagy about it. Adam Gase is another guy who can coach himself out of a football game. You saw that in Miami too. Sometimes he can put a game plan together and the offense just sings. And there are other times he puts a game plan together. It's like, who the hell is responsible for this? It just seemed like one of those cases. He really didn't give Darnold too many chances to succeed. I think that Le'Veon Bell did not come off the field on Sunday. He played every single snap. So
I didn't realize
they're
that.
they're gonna use the bejesus out of Le'Veon Bell. So and he's ready for it. He said before the season he wants to try to break the single season combined yardage record. Now I don't know if that's going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
If Gase can't figure out how to make the rest of the offense play well with what he's able to do, but they got to be happy with what they have with Le'Veon Bell. But the rest of the team's got to step up if his contributions are going to mean a thing going forward.
Yeah, I think if you're a Jets fan, you were kind of suicidal after that one. That one was really deflating. It was a tough one. That takes us to Baltimore at Miami. Now go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Just tell us how you feel about this one.
Ah, man. Jesus, if you are a Miami Dolphins fan, I feel very, very sorry for you. They came out this week, or last week, I should say, and they said that they're not tanking, but wow.
What?
This was about as bad as you can possibly get. I mean, coverages were blown, tackles were missed, people were just in the wrong position. The offense was a hot mess. This was about as bad. This was almost like watching a. You called it. You said that Baltimore was playing against an NCAA team, and
Yes.
I don't like to poop on professional football teams quite that badly, but it was kind of that. It was like one team is obviously in the top 15 as far as college rankings are concerned, and the other one was there just to collect a paycheck. That's what this looked like. The Dolphins just could not get out of their own way, and when they actually were anywhere close to position, like the long run that Mark Ingram had, they just ran right through them. Um, Lamar Jackson went out there and had 5 passing touchdowns. The ball was just, again, he's not a complete package as far as a passer is concerned. He may never be, but the one thing the kid has is a big arm, and he was flinging it all over the place. And Hollywood Brown, he's going to be a hot name over the next few weeks if Baltimore can keep this thing going, because they've got a nice matchup next week. He has got take the top off speed. I mean, that kid can fly. Their tight end had they had matchup problems all over the field. And again, is this a product of these guys being better than we thought they were, or are the Dolphins just that bad? Oof.
I'll tell you.
Go ahead, please do, because I was stunned by this score. Stunned.
So it's funny because according to QBR, Lamar Jackson was actually the second highest rated passer in this game, behind Robert Griffin III. Because that's how bad it was that the second string quarterback went in for Baltimore and was perfect with a TD on 6 for 6, 55 yards, QBR of 99.7. This was not a professional football game. Not on one side of it. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from Lamar Jackson. He was damn near perfect, almost perfect. And he was. He made all the right throws to all the right people that were wide open, running down the field with nobody behind them. But he made those throws. They were there. They were on time. He looked very, very good. Now, this reminded me of last year's Bears versus Buccaneers game, where Mitch threw 6 TDs because there was no defense on the field. And I watched this game at least 1.5 times because I just couldn't take it. But I tried. There was zero resistance for Baltimore. They averaged 14.6 yards per pass. Per pass, they averaged 14.6 yards. They averaged 5.8 yards per carry on 46 carries. Yep. 5.8 yards on 46 carries for 265 yards. They had a total of over 500 yards, right? Was it over 600 yards? It was 265 rushing and 378 passing. Yeah, over
643 total
643
yards.
Total yards of offense. This was not an even, it didn't look like two pro teams playing. This was a historically pathetic, awful performance from the Dolphins. I was looking the stat up. We were talking about this off mic, maybe a couple days ago. The last time a team scored 60, because I thought Baltimore was going for 70. I asked you guys, in text chain, if they're going to put up 70. They didn't get there because they kind of just didn't need to really play anymore. They just ran the ball and they kept picking up yards anyway. But there hasn't been a game this bad since the 2000 playoffs, where the Jaguars played the Dolphins and I believe won something like 60-3 or 62-3. It's been 20 years since we've seen a team this bad. Now with New England coming in there next week, and the line, the last I saw was 18.5 to New England. I'm betting New England. I have zero faith in this Dolphins team. How could they say that they're not, mailing it in for a high draft pick, that they're not rebuilding? How can you even say that with a straight face? They just sold off everybody on that team right before the season started, right?
Tunsil and
Laramie
Stills.
Stills went to Houston. They also traded. Who else did they trade?
They sent Kiko Alonso to New Orleans.
There you go. There's nobody left. On 3 plays, all right, so I got to go over this because I couldn't believe this. The first 3 TDs of the game that Baltimore had, at least the first 3 passing TDs of the game, 2 of them were to Hollywood Brown, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of them was a slant for 12 yards where he caught the ball, the corner or safety was on him, he brushed him off and there was nobody behind him, right? The same exact thing happened on the next touchdown. There was nobody over the top. I don't know what kind of defense Miami was running, but it looked like they kept blitzing the safeties to put 8 or 9 guys in the box and leave versus like a 3 wideout set, because it was always a 3 wideout set. So I don't know what they were trying to do. I don't know. I don't understand what defense they were running. It looked like they were purposefully trying to allow Baltimore to go over the top with no defense. The safeties are there by definition of the name of the position as a safety valve in case everything underneath fails. If you take that away from your own team and blitz them to put a 9th dude in the box versus a quarterback because you're terrified of Lamar Jackson running on you, and this has already happened 2 or 3 times in the game, and you still are doing that, and you're already down 28-0 in the second quarter, you should just be fired on the spot. I don't understand what the D coordinator was doing. I feel bad for the head coach of Miami because he's got no roster and he's supposed to like somehow keep this positive. But this is a train wreck, unlike we've seen in the NFL in a long time. If this team wins a game this year, I would be surprised. I thought Fitzpatrick did admirably well, given the circumstances. That offense was non-existent. They ran 12 times for 21 yards. Fitzpatrick was 14 for 29 for 185 and a TD and a pick, but he got pressured basically every drop back. They put Rosen in there at the end of the game. I'm not sure why. I don't know how it would have helped the guy, and it didn't. He went 1 for 3 for 5 yards and threw a pick. It's just bad. It's bad overall. I'm putting money down on New England for next week. I don't know what to do with this team. If you're a Miami Dolphins fan, you're probably burning jerseys and you're putting a brown bag over your face if you're going to the stadium because it's really bad.
At the very least, I could find some decent Cuban food because that's about all that's going to be going on for Miami Dolphins games. Go down there, see the sights, eat some decent food, but just do not go watch the football team.
They still got cheerleaders down there, right?
I mean, is it worth paying all that money to have to sit through that terrible, poor excuse for football just to watch cheerleaders for 60 minutes? I don't think it is. I mean,
well, then why else are you going?
Here's the thing that astonishes me. They had four touchdown drives in the first quarter. Now, 2 of them were 3 plays or less, but 89-yard drive, 47 yards and 1 pass.
I thought it was 3.
3 plays for 90 yards, 7 plays for 80. So 3 out of their 4 first quarter touchdown drives were 80 yards or more. That is literally no effort put in. Like, I don't give a damn who you are. You've got to at least do something to present some sort of resistance. And the drives were 4 minutes and 26 seconds, 9 seconds because of the 1 play, 1:29, 3:23. I mean, that's just stomping down the field.
Yeah, like I said, no resistance.
It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. I mean, I've got in-laws down in Miami, and they have season tickets. I guarantee they won't be going to any games after a certain point because it's just bad.
Yeah, I think they're already at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do with this. I mean, it was
Christmas presents.
Yeah, this was about as bad of a performance. I mean, probably ever for an opening season game, week 1, for a team at home. I don't think anyone's ever been worse. Not since like the merger. We're talking the last 50 years or so. It was horrific. There was I want to say 3 or 4 years ago when the Bears were really bad and they gave up back-to-back like 50 burgers on defense. I feel like Miami is in serious jeopardy of doing that next week versus New England. New England looked like a machine versus Pittsburgh. And this Dolphins team looks like a college team right now. It really does. I know they're not. I know there's pros on there, and I still think they would beat every college team they played. But when it comes to the pros, they don't belong right now. They are just not good enough. That roster is putrid. They sold off their talent, and this is what happens. New coach, horrible roster, bad defensive strategy, broken tackles, people just quitting. I mean, a bunch of people asked for trades after this game, and I don't blame them. If you want to do something in the NFL, you don't want to be with Miami this year because no one's going to want to pick you up. Everyone's going to go down with the ship there if it continues on this path. hopefully they turn it around. There's no way they're turning it around next week. If they win that game next week, that would be one of the biggest upsets in the history of football based on week one.
I think if they cover, it'll be one of the biggest upsets in football.
It's a big number. I mean, they may cover. Can it possibly be this bad 2 weeks in a row?
They just beat the brakes off the Steelers, and the Steelers are a much better football team. So there's no chance to me that Miami goes from putting up 10 points, so they have to score in order to make sure that the 18.5 doesn't get out of hand, and B, Tom Brady just carved up the Steelers defense, which is infinitely better than the Dolphins defense. If you're a Dolphins fan, it is almost better to, I don't know, sit out in the sun with no sunscreen and just let it cook you all day.
Just go to the beach.
Just get out of the house.
Yeah, just don't watch. This is not going to be good. It's not going to be pretty. It really won't. Enough on that debacle.
Yeah, let's get away from that.
Let's move on to KC at Jacksonville. KC wins this game 40-26. Foles goes out on the second drive of the game. How did you see this one play out?
I was shocked that this game, that Minshew even was slightly successful. I said to you a couple of days ago, it's probably because there was no tape on him, but the guy threw for 275 and 2 touchdowns.
He was good.
And again, I think that's just because nobody knew who he were, because his name sounds like a guy who probably shows up and does your drains on the weekend on a random,
I had no idea who the Jacksonville backup QB was until he was in the game. I had no idea.
Not at all. So, I mean, this game was weird. Tyreek Hill got hurt. Nick Foles got hurt. There was a fight where somebody punched somebody. Miles Jack punched the guy in the helmet because that's the smartest thing you could possibly do.
Yeah, he got kicked out for that.
But I mean, there were just a lot of weird things about this game. Mahomes with his cutesy no look. I mean, I feel like maybe the Chiefs actually maybe could have done a lot more in this game. Maybe they left some points out on the field. Now, that having been said, Shady McCoy going 10 for 81, finding the fountain of youth, getting reunited with Andy Reid. That's a good sign for that offense because they're probably going to do the same thing that Andy Reid has done in the past, which is played a hot hand. McCoy's not always going to be able to run like that. Williams is going to step in. He's probably going to find some running room in some other games. Them losing Tyreek Hill going forward is potentially a big blow, but they do like Hardman stepping in for him. But again, I kind of feel like maybe the Chiefs weren't all there for this game because
you're forgetting a guy. What about Sammy Watkins?
Sammy Watkins, I'm conveniently forgetting about because you know what he's going to do next week is he's going to catch 4 balls for 48 yards because he's Sammy Watkins. That's what he's done in his whole damn career. But yeah, I mean, he was spectacular this week. They had no answer for him.
He looked so good. I mean, that first TD, it was just really bad defense. Let's not, let's be honest about it. But he makes a nice little cut, goes upfield, blows right by the safety. I think Ramsey whiffed on him on the backside, and he was gone. I mean, he torched them 9 for 198 and 3 TDs. He had the game of his career. I know Hill being out is going to be a big blow, but like you alluded to, Shady McCoy looked like he was back to himself back in Philadelphia. He looked really good, and I think based on that alone, he totally screws me up on my Damian Williams pick for the rest of the year because
I told you.
Yeah, well, I didn't see LaShawn McCoy coming in when I said that. Now that he's there, yeah, I'm not feeling hot on that at all. But yeah, Minshew actually, I was shocked. I think he went 14 for his first 14. I mean, he was 22 out of 25. He had one pick late, I guess, in the game, but he was really solid. It's actually good news for Jacksonville. Casey's defense isn't, the greatest thing in the world by any means, but Jacksonville, even though that Foles is out, it looks like Minshew is a better quarterback than Bortles ever was down there, to be honest. They still got Fournette. The receivers are what they are. It does look like they might have something in Chark. I mean, they got Dede Westbrook down there. I think they're still going to be kind of competitive. Casey just has too much offense to keep up with when your quarterback goes down. And I don't think they were going to win this game anyway. But Yeah, Minshew, I was surprised. I'm actually gonna look forward to watching this guy play for the next, I guess, 9 weeks till Foles comes back, if he can, in Week 11, when he's eligible to come back off of the IR because of the broken clavicle. But yeah, I think they might have something there. I wouldn't
Right.
be surprised if they actually surprise some people and win some games. Kind of a la Jacoby Brissett in Indy. We'll get to that later. Any final?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
it also wouldn't surprise me because they just went out and traded for Josh Dobbs. They're playing Houston next week, so if Houston jumps out to a huge lead, who's to say that Josh Dobbs doesn't get put in? I don't know enough about Gardner Minshew to say that they should be confident in him. I mean, I'm happy for the guy stepping into a very very tough spot against the last year's number one offense. So for him to come in, go 22 or 25 for 275, it's a great story. But next week, there's going to be some tape on him. The Houston Texans are going to know what kind of throws a kid likes to make, where he's looking. So they're going to be ready for him. And I think the Texans have a better defense than the Chiefs do. So the Gardner Minshew show may be a 1 week thing.
It might.
And yeah, there's just no chance for me that Chark is going to go. I mean, 4 for 146 is an absurd number, but
Hmm.
I can't see Minshew carrying that over against a superior defense. So good for him for that 1 week. Unfortunate for the Jaguars because they were hoping Nick Foles was going to be the kind of guy who could at the very least keep a game like this. I mean, I also thought that they were going to try to grind this game down and try to make this close. This score actually wouldn't have surprised me if Foles played the whole game, just because Kansas City is just that much better offensively. But Gardner Minshew, good for you. Next week you've got J.J. Watt coming at you, and so have fun with that.
Yeah, Kansas City, to add on to what you just said, looks like they haven't missed a beat. Everyone knows they're a juggernaut on offense, and they're going to keep that going. We'll see what happens with Jacksonville. Houston's coming into town next week. It's not going to be easy. Takes us to our next game. Tennessee at Cleveland. Tennessee wins this game 43-13, really running away with it late. What did you see happen here?
I saw the Bears of the AFC in this game. It was a team that was
Wow.
hyped as a potential Super Bowl team. Um, Unfortunately, one of the guys who was trumpeting that was not here, so he can't defend his boy right now. Baker Mayfield looked like a rookie in this game. Those three picks were, I mean, there should have been four. That first drive, that ball
Yeah.
was tipped into I mean, that would have been a pick six. I mean, there's
Hmm.
no doubt in my mind that nobody's within 15 yards of that guy, and he could have high stepped into the end zone. Those three interceptions he had were bad. Now, he made a couple really good throws. There's no doubting his talent. He can get out and he can make plays. But he didn't look ready for this game. Mariota, on the other hand, was steady. He wasn't great. He only had 248 yards, but threw for 3 touchdowns. He didn't go out there and make any mistakes. Mike Vrabel had this team ready to play, and you can't say the same for Freddie Kitchens. You'll touch on this because the exact numbers. I'll let you get into the numbers as far as what the penalties were and all that other stuff. But Freddie Kitchens did not have his football team prepared to play, and it was evident after that first drive. The Titans were more buttoned up. They were the more professional, quote unquote, outfit in this matchup, and the Browns have some soul searching to do because it was a 12-point game going into the fourth quarter, but the Titans then stomped a mud hole in them. So it was. I really wish Ted was here because you and me would be dogging him right now because
Oh man.
his boy just did not show up.
No, he didn't look good past the opening drive. Just to touch on a couple things you said, Cleveland did not look ready in this game. They're just not ready for the hype period. Tennessee was a better team on both sides of the ball. They're just a better team in my opinion. I mean, the scoreboard showed it. I don't think there was nothing fluky about this. Cleveland was reminded why Derrick Henry is a man. he he ran for 19 for 84 in a TD and had that really pretty 75-yard screen pass for a touchdown, kind of to just take the air out of Cleveland. I think it was
He is
15.
stunningly fast for a
He
guy his
is. He
size.
is. That's why he was picked where he was picked. I think the game was 15-13 or something like that when he took that to the house. And it was kind of game over at that point. Cleveland's tried to come out passing the ball, and Baker just started making mistakes, trying to force it to OBJ. I think he now understands why Eli Manning is the happiest man alive, and why he doesn't miss him at all. Playing with OBJ is not easy because he's gonna
Wait,
demand
you
the
think
ball.
Eli's happier than Big Ben getting rid of AB?
I don't know. That's a tough one, man. That is a tough question. I really don't know. I don't know if I think Big Ben would have liked to have a B out there, for that Pats game. It probably would have helped them a lot. AB when it comes to the receivers. I know we're getting off track here, but let's just do this real quick. When it comes to AB against OBJ in terms of stats and production, it's not even close. AB has, for the last 3 years, has been the best receiver in football, basically. OBJ hasn't been on the field for the last 3 years. If you look at his stats, he hasn't done anything in about 3 years. He's really more of a name than anything right now, and he was really concerned with showing off his watch more than anything else that was going on the field, and that's the problem with OBJ, at least my opinion. Why? If it was up to me, I would not have made that trade and gotten rid of Jabril Peppers, right, for OBJ.
Right.
I would not have made that trade. I don't think they needed him. I think they have enough receivers on that roster prior to OBJ coming in there. Now it's just more of a distraction. More of this team just becoming a little bit unraveled, and it showed because they had a total of 18 penalties. I don't have the total yardage, but it's stupid. It's like 150 to 200 yards of penalties. You can't win in the NFL having 18 penalties, 3 picks, losing a turnover battle, just making
182 yards, Paul.
there you go.
182 yards.
Yeah, it was just a disaster. This game was close at 15-13, which I believe happened right at the start of the second half. Something like that. When they went down and scored, Cleveland that is, and made this somewhat of a game, and then Henry takes that screen pass and goes all the way down, and this game's over. After that, this was over. Cleveland has a lot of work to do. This coach has got to figure it out. I know he's a new coach, and he's coming into this team with all these expectations. I feel like he almost has to take a little bit of like a Bill Belichick approach in terms of responsibility and accountability when it comes to these penalties. One of them was the offensive left tackle. After he got knocked on his ass, he was on the ground. He kicked a dude in the head, got a 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty, got kicked out. A replacement tackle went in. I think 2 plays later, he tore up his knee and he was out. So now they don't have the backup tackle. This moron that kicked the other guy in the face is coming back to play next week, but they don't have a backup anymore because that guy's going to miss some time. It's stuff like that. Like, what are you doing? Why are you kicking dudes when you're on your ass on the ground in the head because they knocked you over? Instead of getting knocked on your ass, how about you get better at football and block him so he can't knock you on your ass so you don't have to kick him in the head? It's stuff like that that needs to stop happening for this team if they have any kind of dreams of getting to the playoffs this year. I think I mentioned that if Cleveland does what everyone's been saying, that they are going to win 9-10 games and make the playoffs this year, they need to win games like this one and start showing up and putting the NFL on the notice that they're ready for this kind of pressure and they can show up and do it. And they proved they're not. So who's coming in to play Cleveland next week?
I believe that it's they have the Monday night game. They go to New York.
That's right, at New York. Now you know that Gase is going to have a better game plan versus this inferior Cleveland defense compared to that Buffalo defense. It's going to be at home for the Jets. It's Monday night. They're going to try to make a statement that they're a much better team that lost that game to Buffalo the way they did. Cleveland better get their stuff together because they're going to get smacked by that D. The Jets D is probably just as good as the Titans D is, if not better. And that offense is probably not far behind. Outside of that performance last week or week 1, it wasn't good. I mean, compared the first games for each team. Obviously, Tennessee was much better than the Jets, but I think that the Jets are going to get their stuff together, and they don't have as many glaring problems as Cleveland did in this game. So I'm picking the Jets to win that game outright. And Cleveland's a 2.5 point favorite. I think you and Ted are both going with Cleveland. I don't have more faith in it, but I don't. I don't like what I saw here. I think they were just a mess. They're not ready for the pressure. They're not good enough. It showed all over the field. They got smacked by a better, more physical football team on both lines, on offense and defense. It wasn't very good.
No, I'm actually fairly surprised that the Titans hung 43. I was not high on Tennessee coming into this season. My reason being that I don't know what Marcus Mariota is. As I alluded to, he wasn't great in this game. I mean, 3 passing touchdowns is great, no matter who you are. But he threw for 248. He had another 24 rushing yards, so it's a good game. So I'm a Mariota fan. I just don't know if he's able to carry that out throughout the year. So that's my big question mark about this team is their quarterback and their health overall. But they go in and they take the media darling and they just take him behind the woodshed in the second half. And again, this is without Taylor Lewan, who's missing the first 4 games with that PED suspension. So Myles Garrett, I mean, he had a decent game for alignment with 4 tackles and 2 sacks. But if Myles Garrett is doing that, where's the rest of the defense?
Right.
Cleveland's defense was actually pretty decent last year. Where were they in the second half of this football game? So, I mean, I'll happily eat crow as far as my outlook on the Titans. Again, it's only 1 game. I'm a Titans fan. In the overarching world, I've been a Titans fan since they were in Houston, so I'll happily look forward to them getting better. But I'm just surprised that the Titans were able to A, play this well, and B, that the Browns were just so underprepared for this first game of the season.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. It ended up being a very ugly performance for them. But let's move on. The Rams at Carolina. I believe this was a 30-27 score. How did your boy Cam Newton do?
Not good. He was not good at all. I mean, the completion percentage isn't atrocious, but I mean, he couldn't get any kind of rhythm going. He did not look great. If he wasn't throwing to Christian McCaffrey, he was having some problems. I mean, he was able to get something going a little bit with DJ Moore and a little bit with Greg Olsen, but he just could not get it together. Now, conversely, the Rams didn't look great in this game either. I mean, they had a 10-point lead at the half, but nothing about it was overly impressive. Jared Goff threw for $186. I mean, the running game really didn't get started. Malcolm Brown was decent. I mean, he was, for those of you who are fantasy football players, he was poaching some of those touchdowns from Todd Gurley. But the running game really didn't get going until later for the Rams. So this was a slog for a while, and both teams just didn't seem to really be able to put anything together. Jared Goff is another guy. You saw what happens with quarterbacks that didn't play at all in the preseason. Trubisky and I forget there was somebody else. We'll get to him later, but Goff didn't play any at all in the preseason either, and it showed. He's another guy who just couldn't get it together. So the 2 quarterbacks were left you wanting in this game, and as we talked about last week, I knew Christian McCaffrey was going to ball out in this game. Aaron Donald is a Superman, but Christian McCaffrey, man, that kid can go. So, I mean, I think Carolina will be okay going forward, assuming Cam Newton can get everything going. But, Christian McCaffrey is a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I fully agree. I just wanted to touch on something I noticed from watching all the games this week. There are 5 games with blocked punts in week 1. And they all look like carbon copies. 2 of them were like slightly tipped, but basically went for no yardage in terms of the punt distance. The other 3 were just straight out blocked. All 5 resulted in points. 3 of them were touchdowns, 2 were field goals. I think 3 of those teams won. All of those were huge plays in the games that they happened. This was one of those games. There was a blocked punt in this game. which resulted in 7 points for Carolina, which made this game closer than it was. Because this game wasn't really close. Now, I agree with your assessment on Goff. Goff looked very average in this game. The Rams came out passing the ball way too much in the beginning. They didn't run the ball till like the 9th play they ran. It was all passing all the time early on. Don't know why, but unlike the Bears, and we keep shitting on the Bears because they deserve it.
They sure do.
They reassessed and started running the ball, especially with Gurley in the second half, and kind of took this game over. Now on the other side of the field, if you take Christian McCaffrey away from Carolina, this team is horrific. That guy is doing everything for this team. Cam Newton, I'm starting to wonder if he's done. I know everyone's saying his shoulder's okay. It doesn't look okay. He's not good. He's not very good at all. He was missing wide open guys all over the place. He was underthrowing guys, overthrowing guys, and the only passes he was completing for the most part were dink and dunk, short passes to McCaffrey for the most part, who had 10 for 81. I mean, DJ Moore had 7 for 76, but it's like that with everybody. Everybody has a catch for 10 yards or so. That's how it is now with Cam Newton. He's going to give you that 5 to 10 yard slant or in, which he really likes. And if you make him have to throw the ball over the top or to the outside, the odds of him completing that, unless it's just on a rope, and he can still do that seemingly, forget it. Like, there is no accuracy to him right now whatsoever. I don't think he's right. I think Carolina really needs to start looking for that next quarterback. I was never impressed with him to begin with, or I always thought he was way overhyped. I know he had like 2 good years, back in the day. He was the MVP. He had a spectacular statistical year, but even in terms of MVP quarterback seasons, his wasn't that great. He's just what he is at this point. To me, you got a lot of the same thing you usually get from Cam Newton, a bunch of average quarterback play. If it wasn't for that blocked punt, this game is at least a 2-score game. Yeah, I kind of saw this. The result is what I expected it to be. I wasn't overly surprised with the Rams winning this game. Last point, McCaffrey. He is amazing. He's an amazing player for this team. If they lose him, I don't know what they do. He is their offense right now. He's great. In the pass game, in the running game, he had 19 carries for 128 yards, a 6.7 average, and 2 TDs versus the Rams D. That's pretty damn spectacular. If he misses any kinds of time, they're in serious trouble. And the way they use him, there is a pretty high percentage chance that could happen. And if that happens, they are done. Put a fork in them. So, any last thoughts on this one?
Well, yeah, because, he had 29 total touches, because the thing you left out is the fact he had 10 catches for 81 yards. So he, they said they were good.
I thought I said that.
Well, no, you only touched on his rushing totals. Maybe you did because I'm just befuddled by what he's able to do. But you're absolutely right. He's just the entirety of their offense, and the double back on your Cam Newton thought. I kind of think at this point he's the what do I want to compare this to? He's the pitcher who still has the fastball, but he's been getting, you know what he is? He's Brad Lidge. For those of you who are baseball fans, he's a guy who still has the stuff, but he just can't seem to command it anymore. He got shelled that one time, and it just hasn't been the same since. So I think in the back of his mind, he's still worried about the shoulder because he'll uncork a pass, and you're like, okay, the fastball is still there for Cam Newton. He could still get the pass there, but you could just see the gears turning in his head, thinking about whether or not he could actually make the throw. He's never been a passer. You alluded to that. He's never been a guy who's been known as a full quarterback per se. He's a phenomenal athlete with a cannon for an arm and is just an absolute wrecking ball when he runs. But I think in his head, he's wondering. He probably knows mechanically everything's okay in his shoulder. I think it's all in his head, and sometimes that's, like you said, that could be a death knell for an athlete.
Yeah, I don't know if it is all okay. He has the arm strength. The muscles are still there. He is still 6'6". He's a beast of a man, so he can uncork the ball when he needs to. But that's only within, as far as accuracy on that fastball goes, that's only within like 15 yards. Anything past that, he has no touch. He has no touch on his passes. He's just not a quarterback, a la somebody like a Drew Brees, in terms of being able to make all the throws, or like an Aaron Rodgers. And I know that there is a separation between the two types of quarterbacks that they are. But it looks like it's really regressing even with the short stuff now, where even when we're talking 10 to 15 yards, you're not really sure he's going to be able to make the throw accurately at all anymore. He's going to, put a hole in somebody's chest if he hits him. But honestly, it's like, there's the old adage, if you don't want to get hit by somebody, don't move, because they can't aim for, what. I feel like with Cam Newton, if he had to like hit somebody on the run, to win $1 million or something, if you just stood in place, he could not hit you. I just don't think he has any accuracy left. Like, I don't know if it's mental, or if it's something structural, or a combination, or what's going on with him, but it looked very, very poor to me, from where I'm sitting, just watching that game. It was very worrying if you're a Carolina fan, I think, or maybe this is what you expected. It's kind of carry over from last year. But unless you got something else, that takes us to our next game. Bengals at the Seahawks. 21-20 Seattle. What'd you see here?
I saw a Bengals team that's going to be better than we thought they were going to be.
I agree.
Andy Dalton threw for 418 in this game. So what is it? Does that say it? So I left this game with more questions than I had going into this game. Is Seattle's defense as good as we thought it was? I don't necessarily know that we have an answer for that yet. Jadeveon Clowney really, I mean, he didn't do anything. He had one tackle, and it was for a sack, which is great. That's what you want him for. But that was all he did. Bobby Wagner was still Bobby Wagner. But I mean, in the first half, the Bengals pretty much did what they wanted to. Now Seattle was able to shut them down to a field goal in the second half, but if there's Seattle doesn't have a quote unquote easy schedule, and they're going to play better teams coming up. So if Seattle was struggling this much with the Bengals, I think maybe we have to worry about how good the Seattle team is going to be. Russell Wilson threw for all of 196 yards. That's not going to get it done against a better team. So I think the Bengals are probably a little better than we gave them credit for, and maybe we overhyped the Seattle Seahawks.
All right, to touch on a couple of things from that Seattle Cincy game, I thought that the Cincy defense looked pretty good. Dalton looked pretty good. Cincinnati did miss a field goal, and they did lose by a point. However, there was a couple other things I want to get to that maybe make that score look a little different than it should have. Cincinnati's offensive game plan was very specific. They threw it a lot, and Dalton performed really well. He was 35 for 51 for 418 yards with 2 TDs. They only ran the ball 14 times. So it's a huge disparity. It's like, 4-1 pass to run, which isn't ideal. The score ended up being 21-20, but there was a couple plays in this game, 2 plays in particular, that were just, really poor defense. One of them was the Andy Dalton bomb to John Ross at the end of the first half. Now, this, in almost any other part of the game, would have been a horrible throw you never want your quarterback to make, because Dalton threw a pass to a wide open safety who completely misplayed the ball, jumped too early. It went right over his hand to a streaking John Ross, who ran it into the end zone. Now, I can't hold this against Andy Dalton too much, because I think it was like a 55-yard pass with about 7 seconds left in the half or something like that. So it was almost a Hail Mary on a 1v2. So, sure, it worked out. He took a chance. You wouldn't want him doing that with 10 minutes left in the first quarter, but it worked out. The other play was Wilson's bomb to Lockett. Where was the defense? Lockett, that ball was underthrown from Wilson. Lockett had time to stop, wait for the ball, The ball got to him. He basically could have backpedaled into the end zone. He was in between two safeties, I believe, or a corner and a safety, but they weren't like within 10 yards of him. It was a completely busted coverage. I think that put Seattle up at the end of the game or towards the end of the game. I don't remember exactly when that one happened, to be honest, but both of those should not have happened and probably don't happen in most of the games. Now, you alluded to having more questions than answers about these two teams. Is Seattle, not as good as we thought? Is Cincinnati better than we thought? I think Cincinnati actually, their defense was very effective. I thought that they were impressive at times. They really took it to that Seattle rushing attack. They held them to 72 yards on 2.9 per. Wilson was 14 for 20 for 198. It's very efficient. 2 touchdowns, no picks. He kind of looked like Russell Wilson. He didn't have to throw the ball a lot, but Seattle only ran 45 plays and still scored 21 points on offense. So they got it done when it counted. They had 3 TDs. I don't know if they had any fumbles. Yeah, Carson lost one, but they might have recovered. I'm not sure. There was a bunch of fumbles in this game. It started raining in the second half here. Now, a couple of my takeaways about both of these teams. Seattle pass blocking is brutal, and if it wasn't for Russell Wilson doing the things he does, he wouldn't have been 14 for 20 for 196. It would have been more like 9 for 20 with 2 picks if he was Ryan Fitzpatrick or somebody else, like that. So his elusiveness allowed that to look a lot better than it was. It wasn't good at all. Their line was outplayed by the Cincinnati line all game long. Their rushing attack wasn't there except for one rush by Carson that went for 21 yards. I mean, Penny didn't do much of anything. Russell Wilson scrambled 4 times for 8 yards, and Penny had 6 for 18. Carson went 15 for 46, 3.1 average, and that's with a 21 in there. So almost half his yards were on one carry. So they really shut down that rushing attack completely. There are definitely questions on that Seattle offensive line. And Cincinnati, I guess the question is, are they as good as they looked in this game, or is Seattle not very good at all and made that defense look better? I guess we're gonna get that answered as the games go along here and the weeks come along here. But I do think that Cincinnati, in my opinion at least, is a better team than I thought they were going into week one. I'm a
I
little surprised
just,
as to how well they performed.
yeah, I just wonder if this isn't a different outcome if Joe Mixon doesn't get hurt. Not to take anything away from Gio Bernard, but he's not the all-around football player that Joe Mixon is. Gio Bernard is kind of like a mini Swiss Army knife. He runs fairly well. He catches well. But Joe Mixon is a much more explosive playmaker all around as far as when he has the ball in his hands, hitting the holes out of the backfield. I mean, he's basically a souped-up Gio Bernard. So if they had them both for the entirety of the game, I wouldn't have been stunned if Cincinnati wound up, hanging on to win that game. On the other side of the ball, I said this when we were talking fantasy and then going into this. I'm not sold on Tyler Lockett. I mean, he had two targets and one catch for the 44-yard touchdown you alluded to.
That
But
shouldn't have
th-
happened. Yeah, that
right,
touchdown shouldn't
so
have happened.
so where was Tyler Lockett? This is the guy that everyone's hyping up as the guy that's got this in sync connection with Russell Wilson, and he was not able to get open. On the other hand, DK Metcalf showed up. Everyone was concerned about the offseason knee injury, and rightfully so. When you got a guy that's that big with that kind of speed, you wonder if the body can sustain it. But I mean, he only had 6 targets, but he had 4 catches for 89 yards. So he looks like he might be legitimate. But again, Tyler Lockett is a big question mark for a lot of people. Is he what you want him to be? Chris Carson, I think he did all right. I think if I'm strictly talking fantasy here to kind of sort of go off of it, but Seattle's a team that's going to want to run the ball, and to only run it 21 times is a little surprising given the score. So. As with all these games, we don't want to try to make any kind of sudden conclusion after one game. But I mean, if their offensive line doesn't do better, and we've been saying this for years with Russell Wilson because he seems to be running for his life every year, if they don't pass block better and they don't run block better, again, are the Seahawks going to be as good as we maybe thought they were? And after one game, that's a very, very big question mark.
Yeah, we're going to get answers to those questions really soon because Seattle's going into Pittsburgh next week, who I still think are a better team than that final score of the New England game. We'll get to that in a little bit. And Cincinnati is playing at home versus the 49ers. And we're about to get to that Tampa Bay 49ers game as well. So I think we're going to find out about a lot about these teams next week and which side of the coin really is true. But let's move on to our next game on the schedule, which is Indy at the Chargers. How did Indy look to you without Luck?
It didn't start great for them. It was kind of a slow burn. Brissett wasn't great, but Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack is apparently going to be enough. I mean, the guy seems to be hurt every year, but if he's able to run like he did and keep them in games against a team that's far better. I don't know that you could talk to anybody who's a casual fan of football and has any small knowledge of current teams. If anybody would say that with Jacoby Brissett that the Chargers aren't a far better team than the Colts, I'd be stunned. But Marlon Mack kept him in that game. I mean, that guy was running like people owed him money. I was happy for the Colts because I thought, I think all three of us picked this as a rout for the Chargers. So for the Colts to be able to put up the fight they put up, good for them. But, Brissett can't have a game like that going forward against another team. I think the Chargers just kind of got in their own way a little bit in the second half and just didn't do enough to put the Colts away. Fortunately for them, Eckler put the game away in overtime. But I think the Chargers take this and learn from it and figure out how they get better. But Brissett has got to improve, because you can't count on Marlon Mack having 174 yards every week. So Marlon Mack is a takeaway. He's gonna make the Colts relevant, but Brissett's got to be better.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment. Going into this game, and by the way, the score was 30-24, Chargers in overtime. A couple notes, but your assessment of the casual fan going into this game thinking that the Chargers are a far superior team with Brissett at quarterback and not Luck at quarterback for Indy. I would definitely have agreed with it, but watching this game, well, my takeaways are that this was a fairly evenly matched game on both sides. Both offensive lines kind of controlled it when they needed to. Both running backs had very solid games. The Chargers probably didn't run the ball enough, which is kind of what they do with Rivers. Eckler had 12 carries for 58 yards and a touchdown. Marlon Mack had 25 for 174 and a TD. And really starting the second half, when the Colts started to, reel this game back in and make their comeback, that offensive line for the Colts took over. He had holes to run through. He had a really nice 63-yard run for a touchdown, hit that home run there. But it wasn't just that play. They were constantly getting chunks of yards. That's why Brissett was allowed to, only throw the ball 27 times for 190, hit the 2 TDs. And to be fair, the Colts should have won this game.
Yes, they should have.
Vinatieri missed 3 kicks, which has literally never happened before. And that dude is as old as dirt. So this was his worst game of his career. He missed 2 field goals and an extra point. This should have never went to overtime. The Colts deserved the win here. They were the better team in my estimation in the second half. I think the Chargers played a fine game. They just weren't as good in the trenches as the Colts were. And in that second half, the Colts offensive line just absolutely took over that game. The defensive front wasn't much of a factor for the Chargers whatsoever, and they really couldn't be because they just the Colts just ran it down their throats. They ran the ball a total of 33 times for 203 yards. Brissett was very efficient, 21 out of 27 for 190. I think I already alluded to that earlier. But Rivers on the other side had a very good game himself. He was 25 of 34 for 333 yards and 3 TDs and 1 pick. Did you see that pick, by the way?
I did not. I forgot
YouTube
about it.
that right now. YouTube that Malik Hooker.
Oh, you know what?
Pick.
I'm sorry. I did. That was for whatever reason I was thinking of something else. That pick was insanity. It looked like he was wearing a baseball glove.
It was crazy.
How do you make that play?
Yes.
How do you make that play?
I don't know. He looked like OBJ or AB playing defense. He just ran across, cut it one-handed full stretch like it was
in
nothing, and just
stride.
picked it up and ran out of the
In
end zone with it.
stride.
In stride. It was one of the nicest interceptions you will ever see. It was just a really, really
Yeah. It was
nice play.
insane.
I mean, I don't even know if you can hold it against Rivers because almost no other defensive back makes that play. That was just
No, that should have just been a pass knockdown. That was nuts.
yeah, that was a crazy interception. Rivers had a good game. I think that tight end who's back from the injury looked good. I think they're going to incorporate him into the game plan more as it goes along. I hope he doesn't end up being Tyler Eifert. He got a little hurt and rolled up his ankle at one point in the game. I think he came back out and was fine to finish the game. But as soon as he went down, you started wondering, or at least I did, if he was out again for an extended period of time. Thankfully he isn't. But we had a lot of discussion about T.Y. Hilton on the other side and how he was going to look. Well, he looked all right.
Yep.
8 for 87 and 2 touchdowns. Yep. He looked pretty good. Jacoby Brissett didn't look that bad either, and the Chargers' defense, on paper at least, is not a bad defense. I was very impressed with the Colts. Right. I think this was one of the more evenly matched games of the Week 1 schedule. Both teams, were right there to the end. I mean, the game obviously went to overtime, and the Chargers kind of just drove down the field. But the Colts should have won this game if Vinatieri makes his kicks, which he always does, and for whatever reason didn't in this game. It must have been the perfect conditions in LA that, I don't know, got to him. I don't know what the problem is. Any last thoughts on this one before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Colts fan, aside from the fact that you feel you should have won that game with the historically bad Vinatieri game, I mean, he like you said, he hasn't done it before. God only knows if he'll do it again. It was a tale of two halves. I mean, the first half, the Chargers ran 30 plays and they had 4 total drives, and they scored in 3 of the 4. In the second half, not counting overtime, so before overtime, in the second half, the Chargers ran 22 plays. All right? For comparison's sake, the Colts ran 22 plays in the third quarter alone. So it was very much so a time of possession game in the second half. Like you said, the Indianapolis offensive line takes over, and I mean, it's not sexy. I mean, for me, it's sometimes I take joy in weird things. I could watch Quentin Nelson block all day. That is a mean young man.
Yeah.
He is that offensive line when it gets going is a lot of fun to watch. So I think. Again, and that's why I was going back and keying on Brissett, 21 to 20 set for 190. I mean, it was good enough on the day where the Chargers just for whatever reason couldn't get it together in the second half until the overtime game. But there are going to be other days where Marlon Mack's not going to run for that $174 and break off a 63-yard touchdown, and he's got to make the bigger plays. So, yeah, Hilton's stat line looks good. Yeah, Marlon Mack's stat line looks good. They just lost Devin Funchess for the year to that collarbone injury. So, Jacoby Brissett's going to have to find a way to develop more of a rapport with, Eric Ebron, last year, everyone's tight end darling. Nothing. He had 1 catch for 8 yards. Jack Doyle had 1 catch for 20. So Brissett's going to have to step up if the Colts, if they're going to take advantage of what Marlon Mack and that offensive line are going to give him, because he's 190 every week. No matter how good the defense and the offensive line play, is not going to get it done.
Ebron actually caught a touchdown in the back of the end zone, and as he went down, the ball hit the ground, like his elbow hit the ground, and the ground caused the fumble, basically, so to speak. But I guess because he didn't complete the process of the catch, it didn't stand up. I hate that damn rule. So that's why he didn't show up as much as he, normally would have. And I'm sure if Luck was out there for this game, I don't know if they would have ran it as much. Probably not. They probably would have passed more. But I think Indy easily wins this game with Luck out there, honestly. The Chargers have some work to do. I still think that the teams were really evenly matched. We'll see how it goes. I didn't even know that Funchess was out and got injured, actually. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, let's be fair to the Chargers. I mean, not that he was that great of an impact player in that game, but they also lost Mike Williams. So they both teams lost guys that probably could have been more of a factor in the second half. So, I think the Chargers will be okay. I think they'll take something away from this game, knowing that, they need to play better for a full 4 quarters of football. I mean, Eckler and Jackson were a pretty good 1-2 punch, and the passing game got it going. And for all intents and purposes, they still should have lost that game. So I think this is a wake up call for the Chargers, and I think this is the Colts realizing that they might be okay.
All right, takes us to the Niners at the Buccaneers. The Niners won 31-17. What did you see from your boy Jameis?
Okay, first of all, not my boy.
He was your top 16.
Secondly,
he was on your top 16.
Man, was I wrong about this football game. And let's be fair, you were too. You and I both thought this was going to be the game of the week. What a bowl of wet garbage this game was. Oh, man. I mean, the dueling pick sixes, Jameis and Jimmy couldn't get anything going. The penalties that brought back touchdowns for the 49ers.
There was 4 of those. There was 4 penalties in this game, 2 on each side, that canceled touchdowns. 4.
It was bad football. It was all outright bad football. I thought Shanahan was going to have his team more prepared than Arians did because he's had his team for an extra season. Neither team was ready to come out. Jameis Winston, if you're a Buccaneers fan, you might be thinking to yourself, what do we do? Because everyone was touting the fact that Arians is a quarterback whisperer. He was supposed to be able to get this guy's head screwed on straight. He threw 36 times for 194 yards and 3 interceptions. It just might not be there for this guy. I mean, again, Jimmy G didn't look good either, but this was not the game I thought it was going to be.
I'm just going to read you my notes for this one because I agree. This was I was not happy that I was still watching football games, so everybody else doesn't have to when I was watching this one. This was just not fun. This was a sloppy, shitty game with many flags. Maybe you could pull up the total for us on penalties while I go through this, but it was not pretty. Dotson, number 69, the O-lineman for Tampa Bay, had 2 holds on, I believe, back-to-back plays, or at least on the same drive, on 2 TD passes on the same drive. Right after that, right after the second one, Tampa Bay fumbled the ball. The 49ers picked it up, went down the other way, and I don't remember if they scored or not, but basically that guy alone cost them 7 points on that drive and possession of the ball. Winston is a terrible quarterback. Tampa Bay ran the ball just fine.
Yeah.
The whole time, the whole game. If you take away Winston's rushing, which really you should, because he, it was all scrambles, 5 for 13 for 2.6 average. The other guys ran the ball for 21 carries for 108 yards and something like a 5.0 average. They should have just kept running the ball. I don't know why they went out there and just made Winston throw it away to the other team. Speaking of that, he could have had easily thrown 5 picks. He did throw 2 pick sixes. To be fair, one was not his fault. One hit the tight end O.J. Howard right in the hands and tipped up, and somebody picked it off. However, the other ones were his fault. There was one other one that was questionable. There was a running back that he threw the ball far to the right side on the outside, and the running back did like a juke and went cut in on like a 5 to 7 yard slant. Winston just drilled it right where he thought, I guess, he was supposed to be, but it would have been like a 3 yard out. Sherman just picked it off and I think took it to the house. I don't remember if he scored on that or not, but he did. He did. That looked like it was miscommunication, but I guarantee you that wasn't the smartest throw all the way across the field for a 3 yard out. Half a second into the play, he basically got the ball and just fired it out there. I don't know what he was thinking on that one. There was 2 other passes he threw because he panicked that hit defenders right in the hands that they dropped. One was in the end zone on a 4th and 2. It didn't cost him anything, but that guy, if he catches it, he goes 100 yards. He was sprinting for that ball, coming right up behind the D-line. If he takes that, I think he dropped it because he couldn't believe how open he was. He saw nothing but green and dropped the ball. The other one was on the sideline, something like the 40 of Tampa Bay. Right to a wide open, I think it was a linebacker, I don't remember who it was, just dropped it. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. They need to take the ball out of Winston's hands. He cannot make the right decisions. He constantly makes the wrong decisions. And because of that and the penalties, Jimmy was just okay on the other side. He didn't have to do much, but he had very pedestrian numbers. 18 for 27, 166 yards, a TD and a pick, and his pick was a pick six. It was also a bad throw. We've seen him make those before. Just a short out across the field with the safety or the corner just jumping all over that route. The defender is right there. There's no need to throw that pass. Just not a good decision, and it cost them. San Fran did have trouble running the ball. That was the one thing Tampa Bay did well. They had 32 carries for 98 yards, a 3.1 average. That's not very good at all. So the one takeaway for Tampa, or the two takeaways for Tampa, is they were good against the run and they were good running the ball. They need to stick to that formula if they have any chance this year. If they keep trying to force feed Jameis Winston to throw the ball 36 plus times a game, watch for him to average 3 interceptions a game. It was bad. As I got this far down the list of games of week 1, I stopped feeling so bad about having Mitch Trubisky as the quarterback of the Bears because some of these other guys are worse. At least he wasn't throwing the ball away. Mitch, that is, except for the last play of the game, basically. But Winston is on a whole other level of bad. If Jameis Winston was the quarterback for the Bears, that game would not have been a 10-3 game. It would have been more like 30-3. It was really bad. His performance was horrible. And, I mentioned when we went over the quarterbacks that I think he plays 16 games if he's healthy because I think Gabbert is his backup. But if he goes out and plays like this next week again, I don't know if you can play him. I don't know if you can. I mean, and they're playing Thursday against Carolina, and Carolina played with the Rams, who are a much better team than the 49ers. They're, in my estimation, Carolina is an average team, but Tampa Bay is a below average team. I mean, I'm picking Tampa to cover that. It's tough for me to pick Tampa in that game. I don't know. I'm probably going to eat that, but still, if he goes out there and throws another 3 picks and they get blown out, do you take him out?
I don't know that Arians will take him out after just 2 games, but I can very easily see if he struggles in the 3rd game that they'll have Gabbert in the bullpen warming up. Jameis Winston I was never a fan of his. I wasn't a fan of his in college. I didn't understand how Tampa took him over Mariota. I thought Mariota was the better quarterback. I think both teams are kicking themselves right now because they haven't gotten what they wanted out of either guy. But I think Tennessee's way happier with the guy they got. Winston again has just been. He's just been. The shame of it is there are times when Winston makes throws all over the field. Sometimes he looks the part. He'll make the throws. He makes the reads. He gets the ball to where it needs to be because the guy's got the arm talent for it. But it just never happens to be consistent enough. And if this is the case against the San Francisco defense, which is okay, they're not terrible, but they're not great. And this is the goose egg you go out and lay. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I think he's just really becoming Cutler. He's, I guess, the Tampa Bay Cutler.
Dude, man, hey, what's with the Cutler hate? I'm tired of this.
It's well deserved. He had a couple of.
Wait, you really think if at the same age Jay Cutler with this team, with this Tampa Bay team, wouldn't be playing better?
No, I do, but these parts that you alluded to that I agree with that are Jay Cutler-esque to me, at times, and I think for both of them, they can make all the throws, right? And they look the part. It comes down to the mental part of it and the decision making. And what do they do when they get, pressured and they panic and they make that really dumb throw for an interception a la that Jay Cutler 49ers game? And I know you know which one I'm talking about. It's just that kind of stuff that you cannot have your quarterback doing because it makes your team constantly have to play from behind as he's given the ball away over and over. He could have thrown 5 picks in this game easily, and he should have thrown 5 picks in this game. 2 were flat out dropped. 5. I mean, he threw 3, and it should have been 5. And it's not like the 49ers defense is that great. It's okay. but they're not known for having some of the best safeties and corners in the league. I mean, Sherman is there, but he's getting up there now. He's way past his prime at this point. He got caught for a couple of PIs in this game. He's just clutching and grabbing people all over the place. He's not the same type of corner anymore. It just wasn't good. It was just the decision making, that part of it where, if you were watching Cutler, you know that you have a quarterback that can make all the throws. He has all the physical tools. He can elude the pressure. He can scramble when you need him to. He has the arm strength. And then he just goes out there and does like a Dumb and Dumber thing where I never thought you could get any dumber, and then you go out and you do this type of thing where it's just like, what are you doing? He's a 50-year player now. He really should be better than this. He knows how to play quarterback in this league. He's done it, but his TD to interception ratio's getting close to 1-to-1. And if it keeps going this way this year, it's going to get closer and closer. It's just not good. I don't know what they're going to do there, but right now it doesn't look very good. At least not week 1 it didn't. But let's move on to another spectacular game. Detroit at Arizona. 27-27 overtime tie. We love ties in football. I watched this game. God, this was just same old for me as far as I'm concerned with Detroit. Arizona was everything we expected them to be. We know who we know who the Cards are. Based on the preseason, they look like trash for 3 quarters, and then Kyler Murray takes the game over basically and ties it up late. They score 18 points in the fourth quarter. This game goes to overtime. Both teams hit a field goal, ends in a tie. What's your takeaway from this debacle of a football game?
We were talking about it before we started, and it's kind of hard to figure out what we saw. Because the offensive numbers are going to lead you to believe that this was a decent game, and it absolutely was not. God, there was a stretch where 6 of 7 drives, the Lions punted. I mean, it was just so the Lions had pretty good handle on this game. It was 17-3 at the half, 17-6 at the end of the third quarter, and then all of a sudden the same old Lions showed up with their defensive-minded head coach, and that's why they brought him in, to bring a toughness to this team. And he was a defensive force that was gonna lock things down with their defense to help along their slightly above average offense. And they got shellacked in the fourth quarter. Kyler Murray was allowed to do some of the things he was able to do in Oklahoma because this kid's got a special arm. He was making throws that some guys can only dream of. Larry Fitzgerald jumped in the hot tub time machine, got his full dip, washed his hair, the whole shebang, and looked like Larry Fitzgerald again. I mean, it was, if you like bizarre football, then this was your game because it turned pretty quickly. So it was kind of a coming out for 2 rookies. Kyler Murray was able to finally get it together in the fourth quarter, and Hawkinson for the Detroit Lions, 6 catches, 131 yards, and 1 touchdown. It's the greatest debut by an NFL tight end ever. So that kid came to ball.
He looked awesome.
Yeah, so he's the real deal. Now he might struggle next week, but I mean, you got a weapon like that. Matt Stafford's got to be happy that he's got that safety valve. So Darren Bevel, we know that he's got a history of being stupid. Just ask the Seahawks when they should have ran it in against the Patriots. He's got to figure out what to do. So he's got a legitimate weapon, but he's got to figure out a way to get Kerry and Johnson going. He was not able to do anything productive. C.J. Anderson was okay, but he just wasn't able to get any fluidity going in the second half, which allowed the Cardinals to creep back in. And fortunately for the Lions, they didn't blow this one outright. So I think both teams feel okay about this game. The Lions got to be kicking themselves this week.
The Lions cannot feel okay about this game.
They didn't lose it.
Oh God!
They didn't lose it.
If that's their approach to going into week 2, well, at least we didn't lose it. That's pathetic. They were pathetic. Up 24-6 early in the fourth quarter. I don't know exactly how much time was left, and then they forgot that they were winning this game and stopped doing everything they had been doing up until that point just to allow Arizona to come back. A rookie QB with an offense that, by admission, by its own coach, played the worst 3 quarters of offensive football anyone had ever seen. It was absolutely a joke and brutal out there. A shout out to Larry Fitz. He did bail Kyler Murray out a couple of times with some ridiculous catches. He did take the hot top time machine, and he had 8 for 113 and a TD. He looked like Larry Fitzgerald again. And me, you, and Ted were all talking about how we would never draft him in our fantasy leagues. No,
I have him on
stupid.
my fantasy league, and he's on my bench for this game.
Yep, of course he is. Why wouldn't he be? This all comes down to 2 things for me. If you're the Lions and Patricia's your coach, your defensive coach, and you had the right game plan, you came in here, you blew up anything they were trying to do, you basically shut that team down. Why would you fall into a prevent zone in the fourth quarter when you're up 24-6 and allow Kyler Murray to get time in the pocket and dink and dunk all over the place? That's exactly what happened. And then on the other side of the ball, and I'm not a Lions fan, but if you are, this has got to infuriate you. And I know me and you, Joey, we did a Lions season preview, and I alluded to one thing in particular that I saw with the Lions offense last year that I had not seen, not never, but almost never with other teams that I had watched, that they do over and over. And they did it again here. Detroit, with 2:47 left in the fourth quarter, ran, and it was a 3rd and 5. They needed to pick up that 3rd down to basically wrap this game up. I mean, if they pick that up and maybe pick up another 1st down, Arizona's got no timeouts, that game's probably over. On 3rd and 5, and I think this is around the 50, maybe the Lions 40, something like that, middle of the field somewhere. They ran 4 streaks and no outlet. So Stafford is standing in the pocket by himself, and Hawkinson is supposed to break out after he, chips somebody and go out to the left. But Arizona brought a safety or a corner blitz off of Stafford's left side, so his time is limited. He saw the guy coming, so he had to get rid of the ball. He held it as long as he could before he was going to get drilled, and he threw it to one of the guys streaking down the field. There was literally nobody between 5 yards from the line of scrimmage and about 30 yards down the field. You needed 5 yards, and you run 4 streaks with no outlets? I mean, is there really no other play you can run to pick up a 1st down? That's your play call? It is stupid. It is dumb. This was another one of the games, by the way, that had a punt block in it that resulted in points. I don't know what's going on, but everybody was getting their punt block all over the place. Arizona had one thing going for them really well, and this also comes back to Detroit and probably why this game was tied. That Detroit offensive and defensive line is still a problem. They're just not good enough in the trenches, and until they improve there, they're going to have a problem with all the teams in the NFL, and that's why Arizona came back on them. Detroit ran the ball 32 times for 116 yards, 3.6 average, which is okay. They got the yards, but the average isn't good enough. On the other side, and this is versus the Arizona defense, keep that in mind. On the other side, Arizona ran it 23 times for 112, a 4.9 clip. They had pretty good success there. They actually probably threw the ball way too much with Kyler Murray early in the game and adjusted kind of later and started to sprinkle more runs in there, and that's when things started to pick up for them. Kyler Murray ended up throwing the ball 54 times. He did get 308 for 2 TDs, and he did throw a pretty bad rookie QB pick in his own, basically from his own end zone. He threw it to like the 35 or so and got picked off. Going forward, the Lions are who we thought they are. They need to improve in the trenches. They need to stop making mistakes like this, playing. What I would have done if I was the D coordinator for the Lions being up 24-6 versus this team that looks like garbage, I would not have backed off into a prevent zone coverage defense, rushed 3 and put 8 or 7 in coverage or something like that. I would have kept attacking Kyler Murray.
Absolutely.
Make him beat you, especially when it's 24-3. Get him off the spot. Like, what are you doing? Detroit snatched defeat from the jaws of victory in this. It was just a pathetic fourth quarter for this team. They're lucky that they tied it. Kyler Murray should be, thrilled and happy that this ended up being a tie in Arizona as a whole. But I don't think they're very good even going forward. I think this is more about how bad Detroit played that fourth quarter, as a takeaway. I just think that this was just a crap game with two inferior teams making a whole bunch of mistakes, putting out a whole bunch of bad offense at times, especially Arizona early, really bad defense from Detroit late, and that's how you get a tie. Unless you got something else, let's move on.
Yeah, I will say this: if again, harken back to fantasy football, you got to be happy with what you saw out of David Johnson. 18 carries for 82 yards, and he also caught the ball 6 times for 55 yards. So it looks like David Johnson is David Johnson again. Now, can they keep that up for the rest of the year? Because, as we alluded to, the Detroit defense is not great. But if Cliff Kingsbury can remember what he's got back there in the backfield to help Kyler Murray so that he's not throwing it 54 times a game, David Johnson clearly still a productive back. His touchdown did come as a receiver. He was actually lining up as a receiver. I think you pointed out that he had a linebacker on him. David Johnson is a matchup nightmare for a defensive coordinator. So Cliff Kingsbury should probably be really, really happy with the fact that he didn't get his doors blown off in this game and realize that he needs to make adjustments because the air raid is got to be dialed back a little bit. He's got to realize that David Johnson is a guy that can help his quarterback progress as the season goes on because that division they play in, there's some defenses out there that are going to beat him up. So they're going to need David Johnson to take some of that heat off of Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I don't think we learned much about either team here, to be honest, going forward. I think Detroit is still Detroit and Arizona still has issues. And if they played anybody else and anybody else's defense, they'd probably lose that game badly. So this takes us to our next game, the Giants at the Cowboys. 35-17 the Cowboys' way. It didn't look like Dak Prescott had too much of a problem. He's getting all kinds of accolades for going 25 of 32 for 405 and 4 TDs, which is a very good game, perfect passer rating. On the other side, Eli didn't have a bad game. 30 for 44, 306 and a TD. What was your takeaway from this?
My takeaway is whether or not the Giants' defense is worth a damn. Dak Prescott seemingly had all the time in the world to throw. He had windows to get it there. There are a lot of guys that were just running open. Gallup was running down the field wide open. Amari Cooper had a lot of open catches. Randall Cobb, the corpse of Randall Cobb, went full on Thriller and started.
It's not that old.
His last 2 years in Green Bay, you'd forgotten he was even there. Just because he couldn't stay on the field, he's just been breaking down. He had 4 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. So the Giants' defense, to me, I think is a bigger deal than what the Dallas Cowboys did on offense. I still thought that the Cowboys were going to be better in this game. I had zero question about whether or not the Cowboys were going to win. Zeke only had 53 yards rushing. They kind of toned it down. They gave Pollard the ball 13 times as well. But the Giants' defense, man, that is not a thing that you want to watch. I think we talked about when is Daniel Jones going to come in. He did go 3 of 7 in the game yesterday in mop-up duty, but
3 or 4.
Are you really going to be able to sustain Eli Manning going out there, having to wing it constantly because they're going to be behind? Their defense just did not look good. Give the Cowboys credit. Kellen Moore had a great game plan. It looks like his offense is going to be pretty decent, setting Dak Prescott up to be successful. But I have to wonder how much of it was Dallas and how much of it was the just lackluster Giants defense.
Well, I'll tell you. Yeah. Yeah, Dak, looked great. I mean, he did what he was supposed to do. But this was similar to the Baltimore-Miami game, not on the same level, but close to it. And one of the major reasons why it wasn't on the same level is because the Giants actually had an offense. My takeaways were that the Giants, to agree with you, the defense do they have one? Does it exist? There was just nothing, no resistance, in the passing game. And we're talking about Dak Prescott, and yeah, he was very good, but a lot of the throws were 10, 15 yards. There wasn't like anything special. They were just blowing coverage, leaving people open all over the place. It was really bad. To give New York some credit, I think offensively, and this also makes me question how good the Dallas defense actually is, because Eli looked like himself from 10 years ago. He was, on point most of the game. He didn't have too much of a problem. He had 300 yards and a TD. If they had maybe a takeaway or some better field position because their defense did something, this would have been a much closer game. Saquon only got the ball 11 times. However, he did manage to get 120 yards on those 11 carries for an average of 10.9. I'm kind of surprised they didn't run him a bit more, just to take a little bit of the pressure away from Eli. Even though I guess, offensively it was working for them. Evan Engram had a really good game, 11 for 116 and a TD. This is what makes me question Dallas, period. They come out with a performance like this where they mop up against the Giants, who everybody knows is in a rebuild, and they didn't look that impressive. Yes, did they win and win handily versus the Giants? Yes, but they were supposed to do that. And they didn't mop the floor with them like Baltimore did against Miami. I'm curious to see how good this Dallas defense actually is. And when they play teams like Philadelphia and some of the other, I think they play the NFC North this year. When Green Bay comes to town and Minnesota teams like that, we'll see what this team is actually made of. Because I just don't think you can predict that Dallas is a top team in the NFL based on this game at all. Like you stated, like we've all stated, that Giants defense is just not good at all right now. There is just no talent out there, or very little. I like they got Jabril Peppers and Bethea on the other side of them, so their safeties are okay. But other than that, there was no pass rush. They don't really got much up front. It's just not very good right now. They need a couple of years, and they've self-admittedly basically said they're in a rebuild. So it is what it is. Daniel Jones did come in. He did go 3 for 4 for 17 yards. He looked okay, but he didn't even need to play in this game. Eli was not the problem. The offense wasn't the problem. It was just a lack of resistance. Any final thoughts, or are we moving on?
No, it's just it'll be interesting to see with the Giants. The Cowboys have yet another divisional game. This time they're going to Washington next week. So we'll see. Washington's defense is a little better, despite the fact the second half they obviously got beat up by Philadelphia. But I think Washington does have a slightly better defense, even though, as I said earlier, Josh Norman is a step slower. But can they put up? I don't know that they can necessarily put up the 35 against Washington. I think this is a game they win, but I think we'll have a better handle on what the Cowboys actually are. Now I think Zeke is also going to be better in the following game, but I think this is a hard game to gauge exactly how good the Cowboys are, just based on the fact that the Giants defense was just bad.
Yes, it was. You know what wasn't bad? Takes us to our next game, Sunday night matchup, New England at Pittsburgh, and that's
that depends on how you look at it.
Well, the New England offense was not bad at all. They looked like a machine out there. It was just ridiculous. What are your thoughts?
It was a very odd game to watch for me because it just seemed like it was hard to understand how they were just piling it on the Steelers. The Steelers traditionally have a better defense. Like last year, their defense was good. On paper, you look at some of the names on there, their defense is good. But if you watch that game, there were blown coverages all over the place. There were missed tackles. There were gaping holes that were created by the offensive line. The Pittsburgh defense just offered no resistance to the Patriots. The Patriots defense had an answer for everything that Pittsburgh wanted to do. Roethlisberger's numbers really didn't improve until the fourth quarter when, who cared at that point? But, Tom Brady was actually complaining after the game that he thought he could have been better. What the hell are you talking about, Tom? He threw for 341, 3 touchdowns. Now, maybe he's upset about the fact that he was 24 of 36, so he had 12 incompletions. I mean, I guess he sucks now, but Jesus, this was a bizarre. I mean, it's to me, given how good that Pittsburgh is, and yeah, they probably miss Antonio Brown, but if Antonio Brown's on the field for this game, I don't.
It doesn't matter.
What do you think that adds maybe a touchdown?
Yeah,
This
maybe.
Patriots team is scary.
No, yeah, I agree. This to me was, and I'm going to make a case here, and it's going to sound crazy because Pittsburgh lost by 30, but I think by the end of the year, this is really good for Pittsburgh. They got to play basically an all Madden, like expert mode rated, team on the other side that played complete mistake-free football, made every play you needed to make, basically made the right play at the right time every single time, just marched down up and down the field like there was no resistance. The thing is, there actually was some resistance. New England had an okay time running the ball, but they weren't overly impressive in that. They ran the ball 29 times for 99 yards, 3.4 per clip. That's not crazy. Now, in the passing game, there was a bit more of a problem. Josh Gordon, Josh Gordon showed up, kind of reminded people why he's Josh Gordon. And we'll see what happens going forward. But now AB is going to be on the other side of him. Well, maybe. Well,
maybe.
Yeah, we just got reports that he is being accused of rape in a lawsuit down in South Florida. So we'll see how that plays out. But they don't even need him. It doesn't matter. If he has to get cut by week 3, then he will, and it will make no difference to this team whatsoever. If Gronk wants to come back week 9 and play this year, because why not? He's going to just pick up another ring. At least that's what it looks like. I think all of us were kind of thinking that New England is going to take a bit of a step back, and oh God, were we wrong. They looked like a complete machine out there. But getting back to the point I'm trying to make with Pittsburgh, for a 33-3 loss, I actually think Pittsburgh played fairly well. Now, there were some problems on the offensive side of the ball with completions, and Ben missed on 20 out of 47. He was 27 out of 47 for 276 and a pick, no touchdowns. They couldn't get into the end zone. That was kind of the problem where they would stall out. I think against other teams, they do just fine. I think this is just a product of playing literally an all-Madden machine on the other side, and it just didn't go their way. I don't know. Am I crazy, or did I actually think that this was somewhat closer than the scoreboard?
I don't know that I fully disagree with you, and the reason being that do you expect a Mike Tomlin defense to blow that many coverages going forward? Probably not. Philip Dorsett's 2 touchdowns were on blown coverages. Like there was nobody within 10 yards of him. I mean, Philip Dorsett can run. That's the one thing he can do well. He was a first-round pick that never really panned out for the Colts, but that's the one thing he can do is run. And there was one where as soon as he planted his foot against the safety, Tom Brady was letting it go because he knew the safety had no chance. So there were a lot of blown coverages in that game. Josh Gordon's touchdown, he just went NFL blitz and decided to run everybody over. It was insane how many missed tackles. The Pittsburgh Steelers. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and defensive lapses. To me, the bigger issue was very. I mean, as bad as the defense was, and I think that's a big issue Mike Tomlin's going to have going into this week is how to make sure that everyone's on the same page as far as coverages are concerned. They kind of got to Brady, but Brady gets rid of the ball so quickly, it's hard to gauge whether or not the pass rush was effective. Dante Moncrief sucked out loud on Sunday night. There's no two ways about it. Ben Roethlisberger targeted him 10 times. He had 3 catches. I'd say that at least 3 of them were drops, outright drops. It wasn't even that the defense made the play. There wasn't somebody that potentially made it more difficult. He flat out dropped the ball. James Washington had a couple of drops in this game. So the offense did themselves no favors. I mean, Ben kept throwing it to Moncrief. Give him credit. He kept giving him a chance to make a play because he was open. But Jesus Christ, was he bad. Juju had 6 catches for 78 yards, which on the surface isn't great. But if you turn around and you look at what AB's career numbers are against the Patriots with Roethlisberger, they're about the same. That's what the Patriots do. They make your number one weapon slightly less effective so that everyone else has to step up, and nobody else stepped up. So, I mean, was the game closer than the score indicated? Yeah, I'll argue. I'll argue with you on that. But it's just I think the Steelers did so much to give New England a leg up in this when they clearly didn't need the help.
Yeah, I think going forward, I think I mentioned this before, this is really good for Pittsburgh. They're going to fix those defensive lapses. Those drops are not going to happen as often going forward. Maybe the moment was just too big for Moncrief in game 1 of the season versus the Patriots. And, every time the Patriots got the ball, it seemed like it was in the end zone at the end of the drive anyway. Pittsburgh was just behind the 8 ball so quickly. It was 20-0 at halftime. I think it was the largest deficit that they have had in like 20 years or something like that after the first half. So it just really got away from them really quickly. They couldn't really establish any kind of a running game. They had to try to come back on the Patriots, and it just didn't go well. So I wouldn't hold your head down if you're a Pittsburgh fan. I think this team is better than this game shows, and it's going to show up by the end of the year. All right, let's move on to Monday night. We got a couple left, and maybe the game of the week. Definitely the game of the week, and it's definitely going to be up there for competition as far as the game of the year. And I think you called it. You said New Orleans versus Houston was going to be one to watch, and it definitely was. New Orleans wins 30-28. What did you see here?
I saw what I stand by. I mean, I think that if somehow, some way, the Houston Texans defense can come together and stay healthy and be a solid defensive unit, this may be the AFC team. And I only say this from the defensive standpoint because I don't know how good Kansas City's defense is. I think Houston's defense, they may have gotten gassed in the second half because they shut down the Saints in the first half. So maybe the Saints got a little jobs at the end of the half that would have put them in a better position to score, but still, they held that team to 3 points in the first half. Now, they probably, like I said, they probably got a little gas in the second half because Drew Brees was going all over the place. They were constantly on the field, and there was just nothing they can do about it. But this game was about as much fun as you could possibly want out of a football game. Deshaun Watson, 268 passing yards isn't great, especially considering that we just said Eli Manning threw for 306 in the game. But when he had to make plays, he made plays. He got sacked 6 times again. This poor guy is just under a constant state of bombardment. It's insanity.
Yeah, some of that is on him, but
No, agreed. But there were other times when the pocket collapsed before he even had a chance to set his feet. It's insane how much that guy seems to be under pressure. But when he had to make throws, he made. Now his interception was bad. I'm not going to say it wasn't. But some of those throws to Hopkins, the second quarter touchdown on the slant route, it was an absolute dart. And then that two pass drive to give them the
that was
lead
so
at the end of the
sick.
fourth quarter was, Deshaun Watson. I legitimately think he's going to be in the MVP discussion by the end of the year. I think there's no chance Carlos Hyde replicates the game he had last night. I think their rushing game is actually going to be okay. Again, I just think their defense got gas last night because Drew Brees got hot, and when Drew Brees gets hot, it's tough sledding for the other team, and he was just carving them up in the second half. And when you have Kamara running for 97, catching for another 72, you got Michael Thomas catching 10 for 123. There's nothing you could do about him. And when you have Ted Ginn chipping in 7 for 101, you're in for a hurting. So this game was fun. It was everything I thought it would be, and I still think this could possibly be a Super Bowl preview.
Yeah, after watching games like Detroit versus Arizona and then watching this, oh my God, this looked like the epitome of professional football at so many points of the game. Houston was extremely effective and efficient on offense. Watson was 20 of 30 for 268 at an 8.9 clip. Outside of that pick, he was very good the whole game. Houston ran the ball really well, 23 for 187.8 average with a TD. On the other side, New Orleans ran it really well too, 21 for 148, 7.0 average. And Drew Brees, we had discussed as to why we've dropped him in our fantasy quarterback top 16 rankings. And I was feeling that, towards the end of the first quarter or second quarter, towards the end of the first half, I was starting to feel like maybe it's noticeable, maybe he's losing a little bit off that fastball. And I don't know, he must have had like an energy drink in the in the locker room during halftime.
Stem cell
Stem
injection.
cells. I don't know. I don't know what happened, but he came out and just started throwing ropes all over the field, and it looked like Drew Brees again. It was ridiculous. The second half of this game was insane. It really was so much fun to watch. The only thing that Deshaun Watson did wrong in this game was that final drive where they went up with like 40 seconds left. It took him 2 plays instead of 4 because he left time on the clock for Drew Brees to come back and put him in a position where they kicked a 58-yard field goal for the win, which is crazy as well. It was just a great football game on both sides. Playmakers all over the field making plays. Defense seemingly was a factor, even though looking at the stats you wouldn't think so, because everybody on offense had such good stats. But the New Orleans defense really stepped up in the second half and started pressuring a little bit and got a bunch of big stops when they needed them, to get them the ball back and actually get the ball into the end zone and score. So, which allowed them to be in the game in the first place and eventually win it. It was a great game. I think me and you both picked Houston to cover, which they ended up doing. We both thought that New Orleans was going to win, so this was one of the few games we got right. It was just so much fun. Going forward, Houston does play the Chiefs this year, October 13th, and they do play New England at home Sunday, December 1st. So I will definitely be watching both of those, and we'll see if those are at least AFC, playoff previews, and most likely at least one of those will be. Very likely New Orleans could be the NFC Super Bowl representative, and they sure looked like it in the second half. Any final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot see this being sustainable for Drew Brees, the 370 and the 2 touchdowns. I feel like the moment really carried him in the second half. I think this was a game he really, really wanted to come out and win. He just looked. We used the cliche hot tub time machine before with Larry Fitzgerald. He just came out in the second half and looked like he did 5 years ago. I don't think he can do that every week. I think that's something where Sean Payton will figure out a way. Kamara had 97 yards and 13 attempts. If it wasn't for the fact that Houston was as efficient as they were in the first half and scoring the points that they did, I think they would have run the ball more. I mean, they only ran the ball 21 times. I mean, they were extremely efficient. I mean, even Latavius Murray had 6 carries, 43 yards. So I think going forward, they're going to ask for less out of Drew Brees. So a 370 and 2 touchdown performance isn't probably something you're going to see a whole lot of this year, even though, what do you do with Michael Thomas? There's not a damn thing. To watch Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins do what they do last night was about as much fun as you can ask for. Those two guys are, I mean, again, it's, when you talk about the number one receiver in the league, is it Julio? Is it Devontae? Is it Michael Thomas? Is it Nuke? It's a fun time if you like wide receivers. Those two guys were putting in work, but after week one, and the last game we're going to cover is 2 AFC teams. After week one, I can't think of an NFC team that was more impressive than the New Orleans Saints.
No, and I don't think it's even close. It really wasn't. They are definitely the head of the class through week one in the NFC. Also, just to touch on the receivers, Hopkins, that suplex he had after the pick.
What a terrible personal foul call!
Oh my God, that dude is such a beast. It's not even funny. But let's move on to the last game on the schedule for week one. It is Oakland versus Denver, and maybe a surprise to many, Oakland takes this 24-16 in the last Monday Night Football game in Oakland. No, not you. I definitely thought Denver was going to have a better showing here, and it started to kind of churn a little bit towards the end of the game in the second half with that defense, but oh my God, did they look bad in the first half. Derek Carr looked like a superstar quarterback, future Hall of Famer. Dude was 22 of 26 for 259, a 10.0 per clip average with a TD. He didn't have to do much more. This game just kind of got away from the Broncos completely because they just couldn't do anything on offense themselves. Oakland rushing the ball 28 for 98, 3.5 per clip, which is okay, not great, but probably better than what you'd expect versus that Denver defense from this Oakland team. Jacobs had 23 for 85, 3.7 average, 2 TDs. On the other side, Flacco, 21 out of 31, 268, 8.6 with a TD. The stats don't look horrible, but he looked bad in the game. The rushing attack for Denver was 23 for 95, 4.1 per attempt, and that also includes a -5 from Noah Fant on one.
First play of the game.
Yeah, that was great. So
first play of the game.
Yeah, just my quick takeaway before you drop your knowledge down on this one is Fangio's debut as a coach went really, really rough. We all expected the Denver offense to be kind of pedestrian, and it was. But what was shockingly bad is that 2-minute offense in the end of the first half where no one knew when to call a timeout. I mean, it looked like a rookie coach. It looked like just an inept team that didn't know what it was doing. But this is Vic Fangio. He's like 60-something, 70 years old. No, 60-some years old. He's been in football for a long time, and if you don't know how to call timeouts for a 2-minute drill, you get one of your offensive guys to do it for you, because that was inexcusable. That looked really bad. On the defensive side of the ball, whatever plan he had dialed up, and you called it, you thought that Chucky was going to figure out how to, pass and run the ball on Fangio, and he sure as hell did, because Fangio, up until later in the game, had no idea what to do with this Oakland offense. What did you think?
I was very perplexed by the Denver Broncos offense. The first half, it was very confusing, to say the least. Joe Flacco really didn't get going until later in the game. They're as you alluded to, their rushing offense wasn't terrible. Their play calling was also a little weird, but Derek Carr going 22 of 26 was stunning. I don't think it's been a couple of years since he's been that efficient. They just couldn't stop him. I mean, they only scored 14 points in the first half, so it's not like they went out and did what Baltimore did or what New England did. But the efficiency with which Oakland was able to move the ball and keep, play field position and make it so that Denver wasn't able to do anything. But the other thing, we keep talking about it. You've brought up Fangio a couple of times, and those of us who are Bears fans know what his calling card is. It's defense, and the defense generated 0 turnovers and had 0 sacks, which is
I don't think
shocking.
They touched Carr.
Yeah, you have Von Miller on one side and Bradley Chubb on the other, and you have 0 sacks. That was
it wasn't even sacks. It was hurries or knockdowns, or I don't think they even knocked them down.
Yeah, so I mean,
there was no pass rush against that Oakland offensive line, who was missing Richie Incognito because he's obviously suspended for something or one thing or another, but it just was shocking how little they were able to generate pass rush wise against this offensive front. And I don't know if it was just based on how quickly Carr was getting rid of the ball. And in particular, I know you are not as high on Derek Carr as I am, and not that I'm extremely high on the guy, but I do think he's talented. The first touchdown throw of the game was a nasty, disgusting throw. He threw it right behind 2 defenders and one of his own guys, right, like a perfect throw right in the window as the guy crossed the defender as he came open. It was
a great throw.
It was like, go back and watch it if you haven't seen it. It was just an all-pro quarterback type throw that you'd see Aaron Rodgers do on a weekly basis. It was nasty. He looked spectacular in this game. He really did. The numbers speak for themselves. This game got a little closer in the end, but really it was over much earlier. And then when it came down to it, when Fangio's defense needed to stop Oakland to get the ball back, they couldn't do it. Oakland just kind of ran it down their throat and picked up a couple of first downs, and that was the game. Who was impressive, and we didn't know what was going to happen with the receivers for Oakland, but Tyrell Williams looked like a number 1. He had 6 for 105 and a TD, and everyone has been sleeping on this guy. But if he stays clean and he stays in the league and healthy, watch out for Darren Waller, the tight end. 7 for 70, but that dude looks like a young Jimmy Graham. He has the speed, he has the body, he has the hands, the catch radius. He has the athleticism. He looks like he could be a player. I mean, I think there is a little more in Oakland than people thought. I think I picked them to win 6 games this year. They do have a pretty brutal schedule for a last place team.
Yeah.
I think it's historically good or bad as far as Oakland's concerned for a last place team, especially a 4-12 team. But we'll see. They might surprise some people, and I wouldn't be surprised if they actually hit that 6 or get over it. That might be something interesting. It does look like Chucky might have something figured out here, at least for game 1 of the season. Maybe Oakland's starting to turn it around a little bit. Their defense was a little bit more impressive. Now it may be just that Denver offense is just that piss poor pathetic. And it might be. Before the season, I think all of us thought that they were going to be down at the bottom of the league in terms of, efficiency and production. One guy that did stand out was Cortland Sutton. Had a pretty nice game. 7 catches for 120 on 8 targets. It's not bad. It's pretty solid. I think overall, there was some flashes towards the end of that game for Denver, something to build on. Oakland kind of had wrapped it up by that point, though. Those are my takeaways from it. You got anything else to add?
Yeah, Oakland looked good. They didn't look great. It's not going to shake me from. I believe I had a push on that 6-win threshold. I don't think they're going to beat a better team. Denver's offensive coordinator is a rookie offensive coordinator. And again, his first play from scrimmage as an offensive coordinator was an end around to the rookie tight end. Not an end around to Cortland Sutton, a wide receiver. Not an end around to Emmanuel Sanders, another wide receiver. Guys with legitimate established quickness. Noah Fant is your tight end. Now, he's an extremely fast tight end, but a tight end nonetheless. So I think Denver is going to have a lot of figuring out to do as far as what their offense is going to be. But they've got to get off the field, Vic Fangio. This is your calling card. This has been your reason you've been in the NFL this long. Oakland had a drive in the second quarter that went 13 plays, 95 yards, 8 minutes and 35 seconds. That's bad.
Yeah.
You cannot have a defense that's on paper as good as the Denver Broncos defense and have somebody go 8 minutes and 35 for 95 yards on you. You cannot have that. I think Fangio's defense will figure it out. It's just a matter of whether or not the offense will. So it looks like Flacco's developed a solid rapport with Cortland Sutton, which is good because I think he's a young up-and-coming receiver with some upside. You already know what you have in Emmanuel Sanders. I think Noah Fant's going to be good because he was Hawkinson's understudy at Iowa, and they were both phenomenal in college. It's just a matter of how quickly that offense comes together. So I think when they play later in the year in Denver, I think this is a different story. I think the Denver defense is going to be better as the year goes along. The other thing to take into consideration, again, to keep knocking on our Bears fan, and Bryce Callahan didn't play last night. He was out with an injury, and I think that's a big deal. I think at some point he would have been able to at least nullify some of the slot stuff, even though Williams was on the outside and Waller was over the middle. Callahan being out there makes a difference, and he was not out there for them. The other thing they weren't able to do, they weren't able to stop Josh Jacobs. That young man ran up and down the field. Now, it wasn't a great yards per carry, but 23 for 85. He kept drives going. He scored touchdowns. He also caught the ball. He had a 28-yard reception, so it looks like the Raiders have a legit running back there. So the Raiders have some pieces. They have what looks like it's going to be an exciting future. Unfortunately for the people in Oakland, that future is probably going to be realized in Las Vegas. But I think that when they play again later in the year, this will be a different story. Good for the Raiders for being able to put the AB drama behind them and get a win in their last home opener. But I was impressed with what they did, but I'm not willing to put too much weight into it either.
All right, so before we wrap up here, we're going to do we're just going to have a little fun and go over who is our good, our bad, and our ugly for week 1. Joey, who's your good?
I hate to beat a dead horse, and we're not gonna touch the other side of this, but my good was the Baltimore Ravens passing attack. I thought for certain that the reason that the Dolphins were going to lose this game and get bludgeoned, I just didn't see a 49-point bludgeoning, was that they were going to run the ball down their throats. And Lamar Jackson went out there, threw for 324 and 5 touchdowns. I think the kid's got a really good arm. Is whether or not he ever becomes truly accurate with it repetitively on a game-to-game basis, but the Baltimore Ravens passing attack is my good. It was a shock to me that they were able to do what they did.
All right, my good is the Tennessee Titans. Nothing gives me more pleasure than the media darlings of the world getting it absolutely stuffed down their throat. And the Titans come out and whoop them 43-13. You know, they absolutely manhandled the Browns on both sides of the ball. And this is without Luan coming back, that guy is not on steroids. But anyway, he's coming back to add to that in a couple of weeks. That offensive line for that team looks like a whole bunch of men with Derrick Henry in the backfield. Mariota can run as well. They got a couple of pieces back on the outside now. I actually think that team is somebody that's going to be competitive for the rest of the year. That's my good. Who is your bad?
My bad's the Atlanta Falcons. Even though I had the Minnesota Vikings winning this game in our season preview, I think in a game where you have a quarterback throw for under 100 yards and you take 2 all-pro receivers and hold them to 5 catches combined, for you to not score until the fourth quarter is bad. The Falcons offense, they played well enough to win under normal circumstances. They just couldn't get anything going. So it's a bad loss for the Atlanta Falcons.
All right, for my bad, I got Tampa Bay, and in particular, Winston. Jameis Winston. That was an atrocious performance of quarterback play for week 1, and he should have had 5 picks. He threw 3, 2 were right off of defenders' hands because they couldn't believe how open they were and how perfect the pass to them was. They just flat out dropped them. He needs to figure it out and quickly, or this team is going to get spanked on Thursday night in Carolina. Who is your ugly for week 1?
My ugly is everyone that plays in MetLife Stadium this weekend. I know it was in different times, and one team was in Texas, but man, the Jets offense and the Giants defense, wow. I mean, they might even lose to the Dolphins if you combine those 2 units together. But the Giants,
there's a game.
Yeah, really. But I mean, the Giants offense played well enough to be at least respectable, and their defense no-showed. And vice versa, the Jets' defense played well enough to win, and their offense no-showed. So it's not going to be a lot of fun for the fans of New York going to New Jersey to watch football this year. There may be some moments. At the very least, you've got a young quarterback who might be making something at some point in Sam Darnold. Perhaps, maybe you'll see Daniel Jones. You at the very least get to see Saquon Barkley. But there's going to be a lot of mediocre in the Meadowlands this year.
All right, my ugly is the beloved, the Bears, Chicago Bears. Matt Nagy needs to figure this out, and quickly. That was embarrassing. On the opening 100-year anniversary inaugural game of the season, I don't even know what to say. It was so bad, we were all puking up, just watching that offense or lack of offense or whatever the hell that was with that play calling, 33 straight passes, Mitch looking like he's never played quarterback before half the time. It was just brutal. They need to figure out who their players are, who they want to go with, what their packages are. It's some consistency. Stop with this cutesy nonsense. Get out there, play some football, move the damn ball down the field. It was ugly. They need to get that together. And we need to incorporate a new category for this week alone. As you may have noticed, we haven't mentioned the Miami Dolphins because they're off the board. They're not ugly. They were atrocious. Actually, we have the Miami Dolphins category. That's how bad it was. And they're going to stay at this level until they show us some signs of life. For now, the atrocious, the horrible Miami Dolphins are our Miami Dolphins of week 1. That is all for week 1. Follow us along as we go over every game in the NFL this year with our picks and review coverage. For Joey, I'm Paul. Thank you for listening. Please hit like and subscribe.
such a simple plan to follow.